Really, she wanted me, but I was like, you can go. So no, just, so any edits, Laura makes and sends on in the group, then we're fine, so.
I haven't even touched mine.
She said she's looking at it though. All right, so that's, so I think that was fine, because she said that by the time we're out of here, she'll have a, hi ma'am. By the time we're out of here, we'll be waiting. Hi. Hi.
Just know our site over here.
Good afternoon. We have a quorum of members present this afternoon, and the New York City Board of Correction, November 12, 2024 meeting is now in session. I would like to ask each board member to note that there's an on and off button for the mic. Please place the button on by pushing the button up, and off by pushing the button down when you're not speaking. Thank you. Our first order of business is to vote on the agenda for today's board meeting, which board members have received. Will a board member move for a vote to approve the November 12th, 2024 meeting agenda?
So moved.
Second. Will a board member, does any member have edits or comments on the agenda? I think Board Member Pitts, I think you would.
Yes. Good morning. I make a motion that all matters that require board action today be moved to the front of the agenda. Second? Second. All those in favor?
Therefore, based on the amendment that all voted items for today's meeting be moved to the head of the agenda, have been approved. Does any member have edits that was done? Any additional edits or comments on the agenda? All in favor of approving the November 12th, 24 agenda? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Amended agenda have been approved. Our second order of business is a vote on the draft minutes for the October 8th, 2024 board meeting. Which board members have received? Will a board member move for a vote to approve the October 8th, 2024 board meeting minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Does any member have edits or comments on the minutes? There being none, all in favor of approving the October 8th, 2024 board meeting minutes? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or objections? October 8th board meeting minutes have been approved. Now we will shift the agenda as amended. What's the first one? And you want to read the, I'll bring it up and we can read the resolution. Okay. What page the resolution is going to cite it? The actual resolution. Okay. We, board members, if you can look at page 16 in your board book, we will go to the first resolution. And that resolution will,
It's on 15.
15,
15 is a resolution.
15, yes. Resolution of the Board of Correction, November 12th, 2024, public meeting. And I'll have,
Just saying, the first resolution on the agenda is, do you have some push stuff? Do you want to do the one that's on push? Long established.
let's do page 15 first. We're gonna do page 15 first. And we'll have the resolution read at this time.
Whereas New York City Charter, Section 626E authorizes the New York City Board of Correction to establish minimum standards for the care, custody, correction, treatment, supervision, and discipline of all persons held or confined under the jurisdiction of the New York City Department of Correction. Whereas pursuant to its charter mandated duty to establish minimum standards, it is the duty of the board to ensure that the minimum standards reflect best medical and mental health practices and accurately represent the current state of operations in correctional facilities. Whereas Article 6 of the board's rules of procedure sets forth that the board shall establish committees as it deems necessary, that the board chair shall appoint members of each committee, and any board member may propose the establishment of a committee of the board to the chair. Now therefore be it resolved that the board will establish a committee to evaluate the minimum standards as mandated by the New York City Charter, as well as define the board's priorities. And it is further and finally resolved that a copy of this resolution be posted conspicuously on the board website.
The resolution has been read. Is there a motion on the resolution?
I move to approve the resolution.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions? Dr. Cohen?
Yeah, I have a very fundamental question on this. The board's greatest responsibility is to develop the.
Turn your mic on,
Sorry.
please, sir.
Oh. The board's greatest, most important responsibility is to develop minimum standards. And that was why it was created. And that is a long and complex and very important process, which involves hearings, which involves substantial community participation, mayoral participation, all other groups in the city. And I think that this is not the right time to do that right now, because this city is in transition. The mayor is under indictment. He has recently published and won a series of referenda allowing him additional powers to control documents such as the board resolutions. And I would suggest that we defer this resolution to sometime in the future.
Thank you, Dr. Cohen.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Judge?
Due respect to Dr. Cohen, I think that those political considerations are really not appropriate in terms of us discharging our responsibility under the New York City Charter. Our responsibility is ongoing. The issue of minimum standards, of course, is the key responsibility of the Board of Correction, and the Board of Correction on an ongoing basis should be reviewing those standards to make recommendations where it's appropriate for those standards to be modified or amended. Has nothing to do with the politics. We don't wait for the mayor with respect to reviewing minimum standards or taking action on minimum standards.
Thank you, Judge Crozier. Dr. Cohen?
Yes, thank you, Judge Crozier. I was present at the last stand in this process, and that was a completely political process. They were constant shuttling back and forth between the mayor's office and the Board of Correction to develop the standards. And the mayor's office had a tremendous involvement, and the mayor appoints a large number of members of this of this board, and is quite involved in the running of the jails, is responsible for running the jails. And I don't agree that this is not a political process. I don't know what's more a political process than setting the rules, the minimum standards for running the jails of New York City. So I would ask other board members to support my approach and defer this resolution.
It's just a point of information. The Board of Correction is an independent oversight board. Yes, it's appointments by the mayor to judiciary and the city council. So therefore, I think all political avenues and judicial avenues have input into this board as we establish its minimum standards. We have a motion and a second and a resolution before us. All in favor of the resolution?
Aye.
Oppose?
Aye.
Okay, so just to go to roll call, since we have some opposition to this resolution. Jude?
Agree.
Board Member Ramos?
Agree.
Board Member Pitts?
Yes.
Board Member Felipe?
No.
Board Member Cohen?
No.
Board Member Crozier?
Yes.
And I vote yes. And the motion passes, the resolution passes. We will now go to the next resolution.
Whereas New York City Charter, Section 626E authorizes the New York City Board of Correction to establish minimum standards for the care, custody, correction, treatment, supervision, and discipline of all persons held or confined under the jurisdiction of the New York City Department of Correction. Whereas New York City Charter, Section 626C4 authorizes the board to evaluate the department's performance. Whereas Section 1-05B of Title 40 of the Rules of the City of New York regarding involuntary lock-in provides that people in custody shall not be required to remain confined to their cells except for at night for count or sleep, not to exceed 8 hours in any 24-hour period, or during the day for count or required facility business that can only be carried out while people are locked in, not to exceed 2 hours in any 24-hour period. Whereas Emergency Executive Order Number 279, first issued by former Mayor Bill de Blasio on November 1st, 2021, suspended 40 RCNY Section 1-05B to address the effects of excessive DOC staff absenteeism and in order to address the conditions at DOC facilities. Whereas Emergency Executive Order Number 279 has been renewed every 5 days since November 1st, 2021, and remains in effect. Whereas despite the suspension of 40 RCNY Section 1-05B, the city charter bestows a broad mandate upon the board to evaluate the department's performance, enabling the board to carry out its core mission of supporting safer, fairer, smaller, and more humane New York City jails. Whereas Department Directive 4009-R-C, entitled Lock-in, Lockout, effective October 2nd, 2020, authorizes department staff to involuntarily lock in individuals in custody for a number of reasons, including threats of violence against staff or other people in custody, or incidents that pose a serious and ongoing threat to the safety and good order of the department, and provides that involuntary lock-ins should be lifted as soon as possible and only be used as a last resort when all other alternatives have been exhausted. Whereas while Department Directive 4009-R-C includes reporting requirements on the frequency and duration of involuntary lock-ins. These reporting requirements are specific to emergency lock-ins of housing areas or facilities and are not explicitly required when specific individuals in custody are involuntarily locked in, and as a result, systemic reporting of individualized lock-ins is limited. Whereas at the October 8th, 2024 public board meeting, former Correctional Health Services social worker Justina Rizwinski testified about frequent and arbitrary individualized involuntary lock-ins or deadlocking of people in custody with mental illness and mental observation units, programmed to accelerate clinical effectiveness or PACE units, and clinical alternative to punitive segregation or CAPS units. Whereas board staff have investigated and addressed complaints from people in custody regarding the use of individualized involuntary lock-in system-wide and at all jails in the past. Whereas the frequent use of individualized involuntary lock-ins in mental observation, CAPS, and PACE units, even if authorized by Emergency Executive Order Number 279 of 2021, or Directive 4009-R-C, creates an atmosphere of permissibility, which can lead to patterns of inappropriate use cases such as retaliatory or punitive lock-ins or arbitrary lock-ins, and runs counter to the principle of humane jails. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the board condemns the use of frequent, arbitrary, and unreported individualized involuntary lock-ins and urges the department to take all steps necessary, including training, retraining, and disciplinary action to address any instances of inappropriate individualized involuntary lock-ins going forward. It is further resolved that the board recommends that the department implement robust reporting requirements across all facilities by recording each instance of individualized involuntary lock-ins via logbook entries and central operations desk notifications. It is further and finally resolved that a copy of this resolution be posted conspicuously on the board website.
The resolution has been read. Is there a motion to move the resolution?
Motion to move?
Is there a second?
Second.
Questions to the resolution? Dr. Cohen?
I think this is an important resolution. I will vote for it, and I urge all board members to vote for it. But the language of it raises very important issues. The Board of Correction makes standards which theoretically run the jails. That is not what is going on during this administration. The mayor has taken over the operation of the jails, established, removed critical Board of Correction rules, including any kind of due process. Here we have a resolution suggesting that the department used its best guess, or whatever the words were, to avoid unnecessary lock-ins, but does not give any due process for a person to object because there was no reason for them to be locked in. So I wish that the commissioner would explain to the board why she is endorsing the continued emergencies every 5 days, and when you're going to stop that.
Other questions or amendments to the resolution? There being none, we'll go to a vote, and I'll go to a roll call vote. Being no questions, and I'll start with you, Judge Cruzier,
I vote yes.
Dr. Cohen,
Yes.
Felipe,
Yes.
Yes.
Pitts,
Yes.
Ramos,
Yes.
you,
Yes.
and I vote yes, and that is unanimous vote on the resolution. The resolution passes unanimously. I'll go to, Judge Cosier.
Yeah, I would like to introduce a third resolution for board action. And this is a resolution that the board will establish a personnel practices committee to periodically review personnel organization and management. And I just want to point out that the predicate with respect to this resolution is in fact in section 626 of the New York City Charter, to the extent that the charter provides that the board shall adopt rules to govern its own proceedings. The board will appoint an executive director to serve as its pleasure with such duties and responsibilities as the board may assign, and other professional, clerical, and support personnel within appropriations for such purpose. So I think it's authorized within the context of the city charter, and it gives it an opportunity. It is the responsibility of the board, in fact, to monitor and review, I think, both personnel practices and the management structure. And that's the basis for the committee.
Thank you, Judge. Is there a second to Judge Corsair's motion to establish a personnel practices committee for the Board of Correction?
Yes. Senator.
Here we have a second. Is there questions? Dr. Cohen?
I have a few questions directly to Judge Crozier, and I'll ask others. What's the problem? I mean, what's the problem? Do you not believe that the executive director, who is responsible for personnel issues, is doing her job? I think she is. I think the language that you referenced, and I'll give you a chance to answer, that reference talks about the board procedures, not the procedures of the Board of Correction staff. How we function, we set those rules, but the executive director runs the personnel function and should.
The charter provides that the executive director, of course, is under the supervision and jurisdiction of the board. And in fact, as a result, this has nothing to do with, per se, whether or not the executive director is doing her job. It does have to do with the question of what is the organizational structure, whether or not the board is in accord with that, and also as far as personnel, staff is concerned, whether or not there are issues concerning staff practices and the staff structure that should be addressed. Clearly within the jurisdiction of the board. The executive director is not independent of the board. The executive director is employed by the board. So this has nothing to do with the question of whether or not we are pleased with the executive director. It's a question of being able to have a committee that will periodically review what is taking place with respect to personnel and organization.
I complete my comment, sir.
Yes, you may, Dr. Cohen.
Thank you, Judge. I don't think that the board has a reason to distrust our current operations, which gives responsibility for personnel management to the executive director. The executive director hires personnel, the executive director can fire personnel, the director can direct personnel what to do. And she's doing a great job at that. And I don't think the board should get down to the level of defining personnel issues, hiring and firing and things that are appropriately left to the executive director. So I would urge the board to reject this,
No.
resolution.
Board Member Felipe?
Yes, can you hear me?
Hi, can you hear me? Yeah, can we get clarification from our council regarding this action within the context of how we clear with DCAS, how we talk to the Office of Labor Relations, are we, I don't know, looking into the Civil Service Commission rules and regulations? I mean, I'm concerned that we are extending our reach to kind of evaluate individual staff, which again, I don't think it fits within these rules. I mean, most of the staff are civil servants and they have a particular protections by the state and the city. So I would love a legal analysis of we embarking in doing this, particularly from DCA, the law department, ONR.
Well, I think that a personnel practice committee would establish that, but go ahead, Board Member Ramos.
Yeah, I think we're taking the whole concept out of its meaning. We're not talking about the executive director and their performance and her duties and responsibilities. We're talking about being able to support the work that is being done by the board as it stands. I think that one of the things that people misunderstand here, somebody's taking this out of context. We're not criticizing or objecting to anything that is being done by the executive director. So please knock that out of your system. What we're talking about is structure and accountability. And that's basically what we're asking for, I think, in the presentation of a personal practices committee. If you look at all organizations, they all have personnel practices and they're responsible to somebody, to a board. This board oversees the minimum standards, but is also responsible for the performance of those who work for the Board of Correction. So we should have something so that we could evaluate to see if we have the proper people. First of all, the resumes, if they fit in to that resume, the hours of operation, and times to be able to provide the training that they need in order to provide the services to the Department of Correction and to the Board of Correction. But we're not criticizing, and I don't think that the statement that was made by the judge is talking about the performance of the executive director. That's a private section altogether. So let's not take it out of context, and let's not start naming names and positions of individuals that work for the for the Board of Correction.
Thank you, Board Member Ramos. Any other questions? We'll go to a vote at this time, there being none. We'll start with you, Board Member Jude,
Yes.
Board Member Ramos,
Yes.
Board Member Pitts,
Yes.
Board Member Felipe,
I haven't seen the resolution, so I'll abstain. Not clear what it is that I'm
Dr. Cohen,
No.
Judge.
Yes,
That being said, and I vote yes, the resolution passes. One abstention, one no, and 5 yeses. We will now go to a variance request. What is that? Okay. Okay, we'll go to page 60 of the board book on the variance requests. And the first variance request, we'll bring it, is on visitation. If the department would like to come speak to that, that would be fine.
Good afternoon, board members. My name is Allie Robertson, and I'm the Executive Director of Intergovernmental Affairs for the department. In keeping with our goal to encourage and facilitate visits between people in custody and family members and friends, the department is once again requesting that visits for Thanksgiving Day, November 28th, 2024, be conducted on a day schedule rather than an evening schedule. This request constitutes a variance from minimum standard 1-09 C1 sub 1, which requires that the department provide at least 2 evenings for visits on Monday through Friday each week. The department believes that this one-day modification to the visit schedule, which has been approved for many years, will enhance the opportunity for visitors to visit persons in custody during the holiday, while also benefiting the staff members who work visit posts. Thank you for your consideration of this request.
Thank you, Ally. Any questions? I just have one possible amendment. I think that through 2027, Thanksgiving Day, that the variance stand through 2027, because over the next 2 years, nothing's going to change pretty much for Thanksgiving requests, right? And this has been a request that's been continuing.
That's right.
So if there's a second to an amendment to allow for Thanksgiving Day for 2025, 2024, 25, and 26. Okay, so
A second.
with that amendment, I'd like to ask if there's any questions. No questions. We'll start with a vote. Board Member Jude,
Vote yes.
Board Member Ramos,
Yes.
Board Member Pitts,
Yeah.
Board Member Felipe,
Yes.
Dr. Cohen, Board Member,
Yes.
Judge Kosia,
Yes.
and I vote yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next, for the department, the variance request for minimum standards 1-04, section C, subsection 2, 104 C 3, and 104 C 5I regarding overcrowding by the department.
Good afternoon, Board. My name is Ned McCormick, and I'm Associate Commissioner of Facility Operations. Today, the department is seeking variances from BOC minimum standards 1-04C2, 1-04C3, and 1-04C5I, all to run for 4 months consecutively. The department has been modeling the jail population since 2022 for the purpose of operational planning. These models have consistently predicted an upward trend in population, which has aligned with the subsequent trends in our census. Between January 1st, 2022 and today, the department has experienced a remarkable 26% increase in our population. As the board is aware, the department has been experiencing a continuing staffing crisis. Despite diligent efforts at recruitment and retention, the crisis continues. Moreover, the population has increased nearly 8% since this time last year. Simply put, the physical plant of our jail system, as it exists today, is not equipped to house an ever-increasing population given our current staffing levels and existing restrictions that are in place. The department has weighed its options and considered the current staffing levels, the fiscal implications of several solutions, including reopening closed facilities. With considerations for safety and security, humane conditions for people in our custody, and the responsible use of New Yorkers' tax dollars, the department has developed a plan that would increase bed space in a subsection of its existing dorm housing areas. As part of the efforts to address the increasing population, an internal review was conducted to assess all options for increased bed space across the department's housing facilities. A review indicated that an addition of 10 single-style beds in dorm areas would allow the agency to house an additional individuals without requiring major construction or additional personnel. The department currently has beds available for installation without delay. Persons in custody affected by these plans would be of low to medium classification only. This part of the department's plan is being referred to as Phase 1, which requires a variance from the board. The department plans to increase bed capacity at Otis Bantham Correctional Center dorms from 50 to 60 beds. To achieve this increase in bed space, the department is requesting a variance from BOC minimum standards 1-04C2 concerning square footage per person in custody in the sleeping area of multiple occupancy housing areas, as the resulting square footage per person in the sleeping area of the above-mentioned dormitories will be slightly below the required amount. In addition, the department is requesting a variance from 1-04C3 concerning toilets, showers, and sinks, as the number of toilets and showers for every 8 persons and the number of sinks per 10 persons will be slightly lower than the required numbers. Finally, the department is requesting a variance from 1-04C5I regarding the number of detainees housed in a multiple occupancy area, as the plan will increase from beds from 50 required by the standard to 60. As stated, increasing the number of people housed in OBCC dorms is only part of our plan. Phases 2 through 4 do not affect the BOC minimum standards, but the department has shared these plans with the board to ensure transparency to the plan in its entirety. The department will continue to evaluate, track trends, and assess our needs to ensure we can house people safely and humanely. Thank you for your consideration on this request, and I welcome any questions the board may have at this time.
Thank you, Associate Commissioner. Board Member Cohen?
How many persons do you have now in sentenced
Yes,
status?
please turn your mic on, Dr. Cohen, and restate your question.
Commissioner, how many persons do you have in a sentence capacity?
Approximately 550.
And those can be released at the discretion of the commissioner, cannot they?
Each one can be assessed individually, and yes.
Yeah, so you can release them if you want to. And how many are state ready?
State ready, about 55 approximately.
So they can be fairly quickly gotten upstate if there's a problem. Have you requested that the governor take emergency action to accept these men and women?
We continue to work with our state partners on expediting them. Currently, there's 25 out of the 55 that are over the 10 days, but typically between 10 and 14 days, the PICs are sent upstate.
So you can release hundreds of people if you wanted to, and you have a significant number of people who do not have to be on Rikers Island but are already sentenced to state facilities. I'll say more. I just wanted to ask you those questions. I appreciate your answer.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? There being no other questions,
Before asking for the variance, and looking at your predictability models, I mean, it is because you're accounting a slower process in the course during the holidays? Is this because you continue to see an increase in the population coming in?
Yes.
What is driving the number?
So there's a couple of different reasons, and I appreciate that, so I can give some clarification. Obviously, during the holidays, there is an uptick in our census historically, so we are preparing for that. We looked at different modification opportunities within our current facilities and had made some adjustments to increase our bed capacity to the best we've been able to. Just keep in mind, if you look at the actual 5 a.m. census and compare it to the bed standards, it's a little misleading as it appears we have numerous beds. But keeping in mind that we are specifically looking for male GP beds. We have plenty of female offender beds at Rosie's, but when you take into consideration the classification of the different PICs, we have about 65% of our vacant beds at Rosie's. 14% of our vacant beds are dedicated to our PACE, CAPS, and MO housing units. 12% roughly is dedicated to our CMC, PC, our emerging adults, and other programming housing areas. So it only really leaves about 9% of GP beds for our male population. And taking consideration, we have some downsells associated with that. So we are getting to the point where we need to monitor our census, which we are, and continue to be proactive in order to address this issue.
No, and I actually commend you for looking at the data that way. My concern is that when I look at some of your data, the biggest factor that I've seen in the last few years, more than an increase in the entry, is this enormous length of stay and due process that is happening. And I imagine that would get even, more challenging during the holidays. So the same way that Dr. Cohen kind of offered you 550 beds that maybe you can work with, are you looking at the process? Because in my perspective, part of it is under your control. I mean, those challenges of actually producing people in custody to the courts has been attributed to this like really, really extended length of stay that we're seeing in Rikers in the last 4 years.
So yes, thank you for that question. I'll answer it. Just as to your point, we've been working closely with our partners at OCA and with MOCJ to deal with that issue in terms of length of stay. So that is definitely something that we're also looking at. We're looking at this holistically and not just one issue, but everything.
I really appreciate that because I couldn't vote for this unless you actually, the department can make a commitment of transparency that they're working with OCA, they're working with the criminal justice coordinator, they're working with the defense and the DA to actually move things as they used to be.
Right.
And kind of move people and provide them with their justice in terms of expedited cases. Thank you.
No questions.
Yes,
To share a little piece of information.
turn your mic on, Mr. Ramos, please.
Sorry?
Turn your mic on, please.
I'd like to share a little piece of experience that I went through when I was employed in the New York City Department of Correction many years ago. And that was that we had peaks and balances throughout the year. And one of our experiences and research that I did was that when it came to November, we had an increase of individuals coming in to the system because it was getting cold outside. And there was a tremendous influx of homeless people coming in, and they knew how to break in to a house with a different amount of different kinds of tools. And if you use the crowbar, you would get 6 months. If you use a hacksaw, you would only get 3 months. Well, if they wanted to spend the winter in a nice warm place with 3 squares and a bed, they would use a crowbar. So they would already know the court system. And as a result, we would have an increase of population in the New York City Department of Correction. I think that this is the way we're going, because we do, as you go through the parks and as you go through, you have a lot of people that are still not going to the homeless shelters because it's better to sleep in the parks or have a bed at Rikers Island. So I think I am anticipating, and I concur that I think we should look at the availability of corrections being able to expand the beds situation, because that usually happens. So that has been my experience in the past. And I just wanted to share with some board members, just in case they didn't go through that kind of experience that I did. But I vote yes for the resolution.
Thank you.
Okay, we're not to a vote just yet, but thank you, Board Member Ramos. Excuse me, 1 second, sir. I think you have 1 or 2 more questions.
Okay.
Thank you. So, Dr. Cohen,
Yes, the question is.
turn your mic on, please.
RMSC is one of your newest facilities. It's air conditioned. It's pretty good shape. It's not, the floors aren't cracking and the plumbing works generally. And you have hundreds and hundreds of empty cells there, and you already house men and women there. Why can't you use that facility for housing people rather than overcrowding dormitories, which is, as you know, is not a good idea. It creates very narrow opportunities for people to move. It probably increases disease by moving beds closer together, and is not necessary because the department has hundreds and hundreds of cells available in RMSC to house hopefully temporary. I haven't heard your plan for solving this problem yet, but why don't you do that?
Well, appreciate the question, Dr. Cohen. So for clarification, at OBCC, I believe it was back in 2019, they did have 60 bunks in there. So the bunks that are currently affixed to the floor will not be moved. There's an area there where those additional 10 bunks would go, right? So, you know, if you envision, it's not like we're moving the beds any closer than they're already pre-existing. In regards to Rosie's, yes, there are males there at RESH. But our FMR did a great job kind of separating the 2 different facilities. So I wouldn't really even consider it the same facility, although the infrastructure is connected. In regards to having male PICs housed at Rosie's, I don't know if that's the most appropriate solution. We can continue to explore options, but obviously for optical reasons, I don't know if we'd really want to be putting male PICs in with a female facility from an operational standpoint.
Well,
Board Member Jew.
thank you. It's, I don't know.
We'll continue to explore all options.
Understand that. I mean, you have all these beds. Good state.
Dr. Connor, we'll move forward. Board
Sure.
Member Jew.
I just had a question. I guess what's being proposed has to do with the fact that you have a staffing crisis. So you're being proactive in terms of anticipating.
Correct.
Based on the population increase.
Correct. And keeping in mind that, you know, this is a solution that is basically can be implemented in short turnaround. And ultimately, there's not a great impact on any kind of constructional or capital funding. There isn't a great need for additional staff resources. So it basically kind of solves the problem almost immediately without a lot of resources.
And this is a 4-month variance request, and it's contingency based on emergency situations on populations.
Correct, Chair. And this will give us some time to explore the other phases outlined in the variance, or I'm sorry, in the plan.
Okay. Any other questions? We'll go to a vote.
No, I don't have any questions of the commissioner, but I have questions to discuss the resolution. We have not discussed that.
You can have a seat,
Thanks,
sir. Questions? Dr. Cohen.
Yes, I'm going to vote against the variance to temporarily increase the population by 293 for 4 months. In her variance request, Commissioner McGinley-Little gives no information regarding the department's plan to reduce the population on expiration of this variance. She urges us to do stuff, but she doesn't commit the department to doing anything. I also think that submitting a variance of this magnitude for a chronic problem on a Friday before a holiday weekend is totally inappropriate for the board. It's disrespectful. It does not enable us to discuss it with the department. And I hope you don't do that again, because it's just not right. If we're a deliberative body and we want to make clear decisions, but we can't make them without having a chance to talk among ourselves and with the department and get staff input on these questions. Well, I appreciate that the commissioner is requesting a variance as provided by our minimum standards. The department has also summarily eliminated several critical minimal standards, and for the past 3 years has been running the jails based upon the mayoral emergency executive order suspending rules on lock-ins and restrictive housing. Our proposed Rule 6 covering de-escalation and restrictive housing and lock-ins remains suspended, allowing the department to function in the most damaging ways, eliminating all administrative due process and eliminating required out-of-cell time and congregate programming for persons in restrictive housing. It is distressing that the commissioner continues week after week to endorse the continuation of these rule suspensions without any explanation, referencing only an undefined emergency. New York City DOC has maintained a form of martial order in the jails temporarily since 2021, replacing BOC minimum standards with the commissioner's unchecked power, and that's not right. In the event the variance is approved, I think it should be modified and granted for 2 rather than 4 months. And it should involve conditions, as we usually often do for serious resolutions. The conditions I suggest were that the department will report weekly population numbers by facility to the board, that the department will notify the board if it plans to open or reopen any new facilities prior to their coming online, and give board members, board staff, and members the opportunity to tour these facilities before their proposed openings, report back to the BOC, and may have to stop these projects which if they substantially violate BOC minimum standards. The department should report monthly to the BOC on its efforts to reduce the population on the following: release of sentenced population, which I asked about before, release of unsentenced populations, men, women, and young adults, reports on episodes of violence, fights, stabbings, slashings, assault on officers on a monthly basis, identifying which of these occurred in overcrowded housing areas, discussion with the first and second judicial departments by the department regarding the effect of overcrowding and urging them to increase the use of bail rather than incarceration, and discussing with elected district attorneys regarding the effect of overcrowding and urging them to request bail rather than incarceration. DOC should present to the board at our January meeting a plan to decrease the population and update the board on their progress monthly. I would urge that the BOC leadership meet monthly with Deputy Mayor Chauncey Parker regarding the mayor's efforts to reduce the population. And DOC should publish a written plan to end this emergency by January 12th, 2025, and submit it to the board for discussion and consultation by January 5th, 2025. I've distributed this to all members of the board, and these are conditions which I ask be added to the resolution if it passes. I recommend not passing it, but if it does pass, it should pass with these conditions.
Any other questions?
Chair, I agree with some of the conditions, particularly about the timing. I mean, 4 months sounds like a lot. Do we wait until it gets approved to make the changes or suggest the changes, or I do it now?
Repeat that, please.
Yeah, like I strongly agree that this shouldn't be a 4-month variant. It should be 2 months the most, so that we can discuss it before the end of the year. Is that something that I would propose after we vote for it, or we can do it now?
You can make a motion to amend.
So we'd like to make a motion to amend to make it for only 2 months.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Nice.
All opposed? Any abstentions? We did have Vice Chair on, but her camera's not working, so she is not on at this time. So she is not recorded for this meeting this time. So your motion fails, and we are at the original variance. And if there's no more questions.
Can I propose another motion?
We will move forward with a vote right now on.
I have all these conditions which I want to be voted on as
I did not hear a motion.
I'm making a motion to to have each of these I said what I wanted. I said, these are conditions. which I
Well, you
want.
said what you wanted, but typically.
maybe you didn't understand it.
Typically you run, hold on, I'm speaking. Typically you run to Robert's Rules of Order on me, and now you're trying to say Robert's Rules of Order doesn't matter.
I'm sorry, are you not going to allow the board to
Is
vote
there a
on
motion?
the proposed
Is there-
conditions that I asked?
Is there a motion? Is there a motion?
Yes.
Is there a second?
Second. What is the motion?
All in favor of the motion of Dr. Cohen's amendments to the variance?
Second.
I said all in favor. Okay, Dr. Cohen and Felipe.
Okay.
All opposed? It's 5-2, the motion to the amendment does not carry. We'll go back to the original variance. All in favor, we'll go by roll call vote, so this way the record is reflected accordingly. Dr. Cohen?
I vote no, and surprised that fellow board members
Yes,
not.
yes or no, please. Yes or no?
I vote no, and I am surprised that the fellow.
Yes or no? It's not for comment. Yes or
I
no vote?
vote no, and
You are out of order, Dr.
what are you
Cohen.
going to do for me?
You are out of order.
What are you going to do?
You are out of order. I'm trying not to censor you on this matter, but please, you're out of order.
Are you going to throw me out of the meeting?
Felipe?
No.
Board Member Pitts?
Yes.
Board Member Ramos? Board Member Jude?
Yes.
Board Member Judge Pierre?
Yes.
And I vote yes. The variance passes. We'll come back to the department for the report. And now we'll go to the variance request of minimum standards for CHS on psychotropic medications and tuberculosis screening process.
Hi, good morning or afternoon. Bipin Subedi, I'm the Chief Medical Officer for CHS. I believe I have some slides. So you'll have to move ahead to the end, please. Thank you. Yeah, here we go. Thank you. So I'm here to request renewals on 2 variances that we've discussed in the past. I will say before I go into detail that CHS strongly believes that both of these help us provide patient-centered care as well as clinically appropriate care, and I'll go into detail. Next slide, please. So the first is for tuberculosis screening, TB screening. So the current board minimum standards requires a TB skin test to be administered. The variance request is for CHS to use a newer blood test. I believe this has been in effect for at least 15 to 17 years when we looked back. There's several bases for the request. First is that the blood test comes back pretty quickly, it's within 24 hours, and the skin test takes about 3 days. In addition, the blood test gives us results without having to call someone back. If we had to use the skin test, all the admission screenings we would do would have to be called back, the patients back to see us in clinic, and that would be a significant operational burden. And I think lastly, that these way that we have been screening is recommended by several national organizations, including the CDC. Next slide. So I think in summary, the TB variance improves care, it has a significant operational value, and it's also supported by recommendations from national professional organizations. So we're asking for a continuation.
Thank you very much. Any questions on the variance request? Yes, Board Member Pitts.
Can we extend the variance to 12 months? Is there any reason that we vote on it every 6 months?
I have no objection to that, but defer to the board.
If you make a motion to amend the variance.
I make a motion that this variance be voted on every 12 months instead of 6. And I'd like to add that maybe we should, it should be one of the first things that the Minimum Standards Committee take up so that it becomes something permanent, because this is good. I understand that And I understand from PICs that they prefer this as opposed to the other way, exam.
PPD.
Yeah.
There's a motion to amend the variance request from 6 months to 12 months. Is there a second? Okay, second. All in favor of the amendment, by voice vote? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Okay, 5 in favor, 2 opposed to the amendment. The amendment passed. Now we'll go to the amended variance. It's now 12 months for the tuberculosis testing. Any further questions?
No.
We'll go by roll call vote, and Judge Corsier,
Yes.
Dr. Cohen,
Yes.
Felipe,
Yes.
Ms. Pitts,
Yes.
Mr. Ramos,
Yes.
and Jude.
Yes.
Tusa. And I vote yes. The variance passes with a 12-month.
Thank you.
We'll go on to the next variance request from CHS, which is psychotropic medication. If you like to
Sure, I have
proceed on
slides
this.
for, yeah, please. So the second variance is for psychotropic medication. The current board standard requires that anyone on psychiatric medication be evaluated every 14 days. The variance that's also been in place for an extended period of time allows CHS to see stable patients in general population up to 28 days out between appointments. In terms of the basis for the request, and I'll be presenting on this a little later, but just to reinforce that higher risk mental health patients are housed in our therapeutic housing units. We have over 900 beds for those individuals. And in those settings, people are seen every 2 weeks. Individuals in general population, if we change the medications, we do see them sooner than 28 days. It's anywhere from 7 to 14 days. I think it's also important to remember that not all patients on psychiatric medications are the same. A significant number of individuals that we are treating in GP are getting support for stressors related to incarceration. So maybe on, let's say, melatonin or Benadryl for sleep. And so I think it is helpful to have the flexibility to see them in a way that's consistent with their presentation. Everyone who is on psychiatric medication is also seen by a clinician, regardless of how often they're seen by a psychiatrist or psychiatric provider, and that's at least once a month. And it all allows us, as I've mentioned, to provide clinically informed and patient-centered scheduling, and encourages us to see people at a higher frequency who need it, since we have the flexibility to see people who don't need it a little bit later. And lastly, patients who want to be seen sooner can do so, through our health triage line and through other pathways too. As it relates to national standards, the National Commission on Correctional Healthcare Mental Health Standards, which was put in place in 2015, these are general guidelines for mental health care in jails and prisons, and informed by experts in the field, have recommended that those in GP be seen at least every 90 days. We are not asking for 90 days. We're asking for more than 2 weeks and up to 28 days. The American Academy of Psychiatry and the Law, which is basically the National Organization of Correctional Psychiatrists, reinforces that clinical judgment should guide the frequency of follow-ups and that it should be patient-centered, which is consistent with our request. And then lastly, I think that our request is also consistent with the BOC minimum standards, which asks us to provide care that's clinically appropriate to an individual. And so having this flexibility allows us to do that in GP. So in summary, next slide. The psychotropic medication variance supports clinically informed care and individualized care, and the variance is consistent with, while remaining more protective than, the recommendations of national community and correctional mental health professional organizations. Thank you.
Okay, questions? Board Member Pitts?
Am I correct that 85% of the people who should be seen within 14 days are?
It's a little bit different, actually. What the numbers and the information that we sent you, was looking at people who were seen for psychiatric follow-up visits and GP. And what we found is that 85% of them were seen within 2 weeks. So although we had up to 4 weeks to see those individuals, we were actually seeing them within 2 weeks.
Okay, so is there any reason why it can't be 100%?
Yeah, so it's not really about being 100%. To go back, the purpose of this variance is to give us the flexibility to provide care that's appropriate to an individual. So what that means is even though we could have seen all those patients in 4 weeks, we chose to see them within 2 weeks, right? And so I think it's important that we still have that flexibility for those 15% to see them as clinically appropriate. If we went to 100%, essentially, we would be scheduling people to be seen solely for the purpose to be seen as it relates to the board standard, not because they need that clinically.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions before I ask questions? How long have you been continuously asking for this variance?
I have been asking for this for 7 or 8 years, I think.
How long has this variance been requested?
When we looked back, I think we saw evidence of a request from 19 years ago. I don't know if that was the first request.
Okay, so 2005 is my.
I think so. I believe that's right, yeah.
I don't think it's appropriate to come before this board, from 2005, asking for a request, especially if you're already at 85% compliance with the minimum standards regarding the requirement of meeting folks within the 14 days.
Well, just to be clear, that was look at individuals we saw during the time period and looked back to see when we had seen them. There are individuals who may have been scheduled further out that weren't captured in that. And in addition, the point is really the request is not about not being able to hit a standard. The request is in place because we want to provide care that's consistent with our clinical judgment and with national guidelines.
Okay, but you cited national guidelines, right?
Correct.
90 days, outpatients. How do you correlate outpatients with persons in custody?
So outpatient would be the equivalent of our general population clinics. And again, right now, the board standards would say that we have to see patients in GP within 14 days. All the national standards say you can have up to 90 days, and what we're asking for is 28. So the board standard is much, much, much more restrictive than national standards.
And without this variance, what would your rate of compliance be, in your opinion?
It's hard for me to know, because we're talking about scheduling and seeing. They're kind of different data points, and I don't have that information here.
Okay, is there anyone on your staff that can provide that? Because that's a critical point.
Yeah, we can look into providing it. We'd have to talk to our data team, but again, this is about principle and about having standards that follow national guidelines, not just about meeting the standard.
Hi, sorry, it's Patsy Yang, Senior Vice President for Correctional Health Services. I would not want any of the staff in Correctional Health Services to make decisions and judgments that go against what a patient's individual needs are. So regardless of what the standard is, we continue to treat each patient according to their individual needs at that point in time. And I would never want to ask any of our healthcare professionals to do anything differently.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, we have a variance and we'll go to a vote on psychotropic medication for CHS. And I'll start a little bit differently. Felipe?
Yes.
Board Member Pitts?
Yes.
Board Member Ramos?
Yes.
Board Member Jude?
Yes.
Board Member Dr. Cohen,
Yes.
Judge Cashier,
Yes,
and I will abstain this time. Thank you. And
Thank you.
the variance passes.
Thank you.
At this time, we will now resume our previously scheduled agenda and go to PIC public comments. Here, pre-recorded anonymous public comment from people in custody.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is been a detainee here at Rose M. Singer Center on Rikers Island since September of 2022. I have been in segregated confinement since May of 2024. That's a total of 5 months without any programming, without any resources, or without an outlet to help assist with depression, anxiety, outpatient, programs, drug and alcohol abuse. There's absolutely no programming here at Rose M. Singer, in dorm programming or out of dorm programming. There's just no resources. So I have been in confinement, me along with numerous other detainees, but me myself has been in confinement for the past 5 months. I would like for someone to do something about it. This is also relating to law library. We have a session. It's supposed to be, each dorm has its own time slot. This time slot for 2 East B is from 7 to 9 a.m. And unfortunately, we have not been awarded that. There's a minimum standard of 5 days a week, a minimum of 2 hours per day, and we are just not receiving these resources so that we will be able to adequately defend ourselves in these legal cases that we're facing. Someone needs to do something immediately. These living conditions are just completely inhumane, and it's unacceptable. The confinement is causing mental illness within detainees here at Rikers Island. It's causing health problems such as high blood pressure and other problems, other health problems, heart problems, and mental health problems. Again, thank you so much. Have a blessed day.
The caller has hung up.
I'm calling on behalf. She's being refused to be produced at all televisions on Rikers Island and Muslim Singer. She's being harassed by staff. They're not doing their job and they're abusing their authority. Please know these things are in effect from the courts, Department of Corrections, the Attorney General, and the federal court. Thank you.
The caller has hung up.
Thank you to the callers from PIC. I'd like for the department, if you'd like to respond.
Good afternoon again, board members. Thank you to the board for allowing the department to look into the allegations made on the voicemail recordings from persons in custody. This opportunity is critical, not only to allow the department to address the allegations, but more importantly, to ensure any issues are rectified in real time. First, I'll respond to the recording, which was left by a person detained in the Rose M. Singer Center. This person in custody has been detained since September 22, and the allegations made were certainly concerning. This person claims to have been in segregated confinement from May 2024 to present, totaling 5 months without access to programming or resources. Additionally, the caller alleges that their housing unit lacks access to the law library. Finally, the person described the living conditions as inhumane, asserting that segregated confinement is causing severe mental and physical health issues for detainees. Upon learning of these allegations made by the caller, the department looked into first the program offerings and access to clinic for this individual. The caller has been living in one housing area for the past several months. This housing unit offers a variety of programs both within and outside of the housing area. A wide variety of programs were made available to this housing unit during the time frame indicated, including barista training from March to April of this year, driving simulator from February to March, makeup and artistry, April to May, barbering in April, along with additional rotating opportunities for scaffolding and OSHA training. Additionally, the unit has participated in congregate Family Day services in May, a congregate baptism in July, Rosie's Got Talent auditions in August, and a domestic violence awareness event in October, and regular New York Public Library services. Since the department began using a tracking system in February of this year, records indicate that this individual has been offered 229 program sessions. Department's reports indicate that the person has either attended those programs or on certain days chosen not to participate. In May 2024, the individual attended 19 program sessions, in June 13, in July 20, in August 16, in September 7, and finally 8 in October. Additionally, this individual serves as the housing area representative for the PIC Council, formerly known as Inmate Council, and regularly attends the facility-wide PIC Council meetings, most recently on October 17th of this year. The PIC Council convenes monthly in a congregate location, and a representative from each housing area attends the meeting to speak on behalf of those in the house and to voice concerns. Further, in reviewing access to law library services, it was indicated that the person it was found that the person regularly attends law library sessions in the Rose M. Singer Center Law Library. Through an interview held with the person regarding challenges with law library access, we did learn that the legal coordinator's tour started 1 hour after the first law library session began. Therefore, the person in custody did not have access to the legal coordinator for the full 2 hours that they were in the law library. As of November, the legal coordinator's tour has been modified to start at the beginning of the first law library session to ensure persons in custody have full access to the legal coordinator during the entire duration of each law library session. Finally, the department looked into this person's clinic production in light of the allegations made concerning medical and mental health care. The individual has been seen in the clinic at least 9 times since August of this year for a variety of appointment types. We will continue to facilitate this person's access to programs and clinic appointments as they wish to attend them. I'll now address the second recording left by a representative of another individual detained at the Rose M. Singer Center. This person has been detained since May of 2023. The caller claims that the individual has been denied access to televisits. The department looked into the issue of televisit access for this person in custody. The individual has received 2 televisits during their incarceration thus far. The first occurred on March 8th of this year at 5:00 p.m., and the second on March 15th at approximately 3:30 p.m. Each televisit lasted approximately 1 hour. No additional applications or requests have been submitted for this individual. However, if further applications are submitted, the department will ensure that those televisits are scheduled and that the individual is produced to the visit floor for the televisit appointment. The department relies on our central visit staff who work diligently to schedule thousands of televisits every year. With support of external partners and grant funding, the department will be taking significant steps over the next several months to improve upon the visit process in an effort to streamline for all those visiting their loved ones on Rikers Island. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Adam. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to our executive director.
Thank you. Good afternoon. First, I want to start with sharing our deepest condolences with the families of department staff who have passed since the board's October meeting. The staff who have passed are retired Captain Robert Spinoza, retired Captain John McHugh, retired Captain Rose Shepard, retired Officer Christopher James Watson, retired Captain Robert Wheeler, retired Officer Joseph Lucia, retired Assistant Deputy Warden Regina Thomas, and retired Captain Ronald Rosati. And next, I'll give a census update. As of November 11th, 2024, there were approximately 6,619 individuals in department custody. And broken down by facility, in Bellevue Hospital Ward, 44 individuals. In Elmhurst Hospital Ward, 8 individuals. EMTC, 1,528 individuals. GRVC, 979. NIC, 275. OBCC, 1,455. RESH, 165. RMSC, 410. RNDC, 1,077. And West Facility, 675. And regarding reporting, BOC's upcoming reports include a report assessing the department's 2024 heat mitigation efforts, a public report on the deaths of Anthony Jordan and Charisma Jones, a report assessing the department's PREA complaint investigation process, a semi-annual monitoring report, a semi-annual report assessing the city's borough-based jails plan, a report evaluating the department's grievance complaint process, and a report regarding individualized involuntary lock-ins. And next, I will turn it to BOC's Director of Programming and Community Support, Mr. Shensi Augustin, who will present findings from an assessment of DOC's law library operations.
Hello, good afternoon, members of the board, the public, and DOC. Again, my name is Shensi Augustin, and I'm the Director of Programming and Community Support. Before I jump into the report, I'd just like to say a couple of words of thanks. Of course, thank you to the board for putting this on the agenda, as this has been a concern for a number of our staff who continue to tour the facilities daily. I want to thank our Executive Director, Ms. Jasmine Georges-Yilla, for her continued support of the team on Rikers Island. I also want to shout out our AED, Ms. Katrina Blackman, for continuing to support us on island and our leadership. And I also continue wanting to support or thank our other directors, Ms. Shaquana Pearson, for her continued efforts, and also Ms. Barbie Melendez, because she conducted the initial assessment last year in October 2023. Now, I also want to thank the fearless men and women who carried the charge of touring the facilities and actually collecting the information, which allowed us to be able to put this presentation together for you today. And I won't say their first names because, again, for their safety and because they tour daily, but I definitely want to give them a shout out. Ms. Porter, Ms. Scott, Ms. Garcia, Ms. Reynolds, Mr. Ramon, Ms. Castellar, and Mr. Acosta. And last but not least, of course, to us, the greatest. And I encourage all of you to join me in applauding this woman because she has worked with the board for over 25 years. And I dare to say that while I wasn't here when she started with the board 25 years ago, she continues to be zealous in her representation of the board and continues to inspire us at the board to continue to do the work that we do. So I want us to put our hands together for Ms. Azaji for all of her hard work and the assessments and the visualizations for this law library report. So thank you, thank you. And now, without further ado, what we're looking at is access to courts and legal services, law library. And our standard, it looks at this in subsection 1-08. And so a small synopsis was shared with the board and also with the department. And we do intend to, in a couple of weeks, share a more fuller report with both the board and the department. So in looking at the introduction, the board standards, again, subsection 1-08F, is the rule that mandates access to courts and legal services. And in this section, we find the board's rules on the operation of law library services throughout the Department of Correction facilities. During the week of August 20th to 2024 through August 24th, 2024, the Board of Corrections Monitoring Unit conducted a reassessment of the Department of Corrections Law Library operations, their directive 3501R-B, to analyze the department's compliance and adherence to the board's minimum standard, again, section 1-08F, and the department's own law library policies. So now, as I shared earlier, this report was the initial report. The first assessment was conducted in October 2023. And on this slide, we're just looking at what was happening during that time and some of the findings that our staff uncovered. And so during that time, the board again conducted its first assessment of law library services. And at the time of the first assessment, the Mayor de Blasio issued a few emergency executive orders, specifically numbers 279 and 241 were in effect. The EEOs were issued by Mayor de Blasio in 2021 and continued through Adams's administration until about April 2024. During the early part of the pandemic, DOC staff, as well as people in custody, were becoming infected with the COVID-19 virus. And so in an effort to minimize the spread of the virus, the mayor issued an a state of emergency for the Department of Correction. And in that state of emergency, he issued these EEOs, which continued on up until 2024, which terminated or canceled or suspended rather the law library services. And throughout that time, up until 2023, while the effects of the pandemic greatly diminished, the EEOs continued to remain in place. The department during that time and into moving forward was experiencing a whole lot of staff absenteeism and retention issues. And as a result of that, the department has increased their recruitment efforts and bringing more staff into these jails. Some of the findings were that there was an insufficient use of sign-up sheets. There was insufficient amount of supplies to sufficiently operate law libraries. There was a limited access to notary publics, and the system for scheduling had a ton of overlapping issues, and there were inoperable kiosks, typewriters, and copy machines. There was also remote law library services, i.e. SLIPs, operating in multiple facilities across multiple units. And as we move further along in the presentation, we'll talk a little bit more about what SLIPs means. So now, again, going back to the EEOs impacting law library services, it was terminated April 2024 by EEO number 579. And so now we move on to the process. So the process included where staff reviewed the department's law library directive, again, 3501-R-B, and staff also reviewed the board standard on access to legal services, again, 1-08F. An assessment of a tool was, through that assessment, a tool was created. After the tool was created, staff had an opportunity to review that tool and ask clarifying questions, issue feedback prior to the use of the assessment instrument. Board staff later toured facilities using that assessment tool. They collected documents from facilities, and they also performed a 2-hour in-person observation, as our standard requires for people in custody to be able to have 2 hours in the law library at minimum. Board staff also collected and reviewed facility program schedules, and that's to, again, assess whether or not there were still overlapping issues when it came to other services like recreation, sick call, and religious services. Board staff continue to review the availability of facility law library schedules, and board staff reviewed sign-up sheets as well. So now looking at the minimum standard itself. And so in this section, I just highlighted some of the most important pieces that are pertinent to this assessment. And so first, we're looking at the law library operations, where each facility shall maintain a properly equipped and staffed law library. Each law library should be open for a minimum of 5 days per week, including 1 weekend day. When it comes to schedules, the schedule should not conflict with other activities such as recreation, meals, school, sick call, etc. With regard to those who are housed in contagious disease units, people housed for medical reasons in a CDU may actually be denied access to the law libraries. In reference to legal research classes should be conducted for people housed in general population on at least a quarterly basis. So that should be about 4 times a year at minimum. With regard to legal documents and supplies, people in custody should have reasonable access to typewriters, word processors, and photocopiers. Also, a sufficient number of operable equipment should be provided. And lastly, with regard to staffing, there should be trained civilian legal coordinators, as well as uniformed staff that are trained in law library procedures. There are also, there's also other staff within those law libraries, which are people in custody who have been trained to work and serve other people in custody in those law libraries. And there's also a requirement for those who work in the law libraries to, at least that for the law libraries to have Spanish-speaking assistants, but we'll look at that as we move further along. And now looking at the evaluation criteria. Across a number of things we looked at, these being the most important, we looked at the facility census and the law library's 24-hour report. We also looked at the law library schedules and possible conflicts with other mandated services. We looked at the use and availability of law library sign-up sheets, legal research schedules, law library equipment, Spanish language support, sign-up sheets, and staff also conducted interviews with department staff and people in custody. So what you see in front of you now is a pie chart. So this pie chart, again, is looking at an average for the week that we did the second assessment of August 20th to August 2024. Excuse me, August 20th to August 24th of 2024. So what we see is that we see the darker blue and a lighter blue. So the darker blue is the general average for that week of people who are housed in the department's custody. So we had about 6,415 individuals who were detained in the department's custody for that week. What we found was that out of that number, only 316 individuals on average use the law library. So that's about 5%, right, that use the law library. And then in the next chart that you see, we again looked at the average for the week's usage according to each facility. And we see that EMTC being the highest, it's also a new admission facility at 1,474. Approximately on average, you would have about 94 people that week that use the law library, and that's about 6%. GRVC, 975 on average, at 41 people using the law library, that's about 4%. And NIC, 253, with a usage of about 24 individuals, that's at about 9.5%. We have at OBCC, 1,454 individuals housed and 44 individuals on average, that's about 3%. And RESH, which is a restrictive, You have at about 166 people in custody there. On average, about 18 individuals access the law library. That was 10%. At RMSC, 401, 18 on average used it. That's about 4%. At RNDC, 1,021. On average, 40 individuals used it for that week at 4%. And at West Facility, we had about 671 people in custody on average, and 37 individuals used it. That's about 5%. And so, again, we don't conclusively know how many people actually signed up because we're still looking at where the sign-up sheets are. They're supposed to be posted in every housing area. And so we're still looking at those numbers. And now jumping into sign-up sheets and remote services. So on this slide, I broke it up into 3 different sections to give you an understanding of what each piece is and also our findings. And we broke it up into sign-up sheets, remote services, and also the board's findings. So with regard to sign-up sheets, the department policy mandates the use of sign-up sheets for people in custody to gain access to in-person law library services. Also, sign-up sheets should be posted in all housing areas. People in custody sign up for law library services the preceding night, so the night before. When it comes to remote services, which are also called SLIPs, was started during the COVID-19 pandemic to again decrease the spread of the virus while continuing to provide the access to law library services. The SLIPs are often used in restrictive units where SLIPs may be used to request legal research, case law, and even attorney information. What the board found was that sign-up sheets in this second assessment sign-up sheets are being used in the majority of facilities with some exceptions. Remote law library continues to be a practice at West Facility CDU, RESH, OBCC Annex, GRVC, and EMTC. Now, what's important to note about some of these areas is that while we know that RESH is a restrictive area, when it comes to EMTC, OBCC, and GRVC, those are there are no restrictive areas in those facilities, so SLIPs should not be found in those spaces and places. So now we're looking at when it comes to operability of equipment. So here we're looking at kiosks and typewriters. We also received a lot of reports of broken copy machines and things like that. But for the purpose of this, we're looking at kiosks and typewriters. And so along the bars, you see 100%, right? 100% signifies fully operable. And anything less than 100% is showing that there are some issues. Maybe it's one machine that's inoperable, 2 or 3. But what's important to note across the board is that there seems to be more 100% operability when it comes to typewriters. Where we found most issues was when it came to the operability of kiosks. Most notably was during the course of our assessment at EMTC. EMTC did not have any operable kiosks, and those kiosks were inoperable for a number of months. Since that time, we have worked with the department, and we are grateful for that. And they have been able to bring those kiosks back to operation. And so we're grateful, and we continue to work with the department, collaborating to address some of those issues. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? So now, again, still continuing to look at law library equipment, the board standards requires that the department maintain a properly equipped and staffed law library. The department's policy requires timely repair of inoperable equipment and subsequent alternatives in the interim. So again, in this slide, broke it up into those 3 sections so you understand the kiosks, typewriters, and also what our findings were. And so when it comes to kiosks, kiosks are used to conduct legal research. People in custody, law library clerks, the PIs who are people in custody, are required to take training to understand how to properly use these kiosks. There's also the mandated legal research classes that should be scheduled and conducted by legal coordinators to educate people in custody of shepherdizing practices. Also with kiosks, law library staff are required to report inoperable kiosks within a timely manner. When it comes to typewriters, typewriters are used by people in custody to prepare legal documents. Some of those legal documents are motions, briefs, and legal memoranda. Typewriters are required to, again, be repaired promptly. What the board found in the second assessment is that the directive does not mention kiosks, although it should. Board staff reported a number of inoperable kiosks, also long delays on repairs, and repeated inoperability of kiosks after being repaired. Inoperable copy machines resulting in an inability for people in custody to make copies of legal documents, and typewriters, again, appear to be to present the least amount of inoperability issues. And I continue to say that we continue to work with the department to address those issues when our staff on the ground encounter them. Now moving into Spanish speaking. When it comes to the availability of Spanish speakers, this visualization is showing it broken down by facility. Immediately in looking at this, we see that there are a couple of holes, at least during the time of our assessment, where GRVC did not have Spanish speakers. RESH did not have any Spanish speakers, and also at West Facility CDU, there wasn't any Spanish-speaking assistants available. At EMTC, where we see, prior to jumping into it, to dig into it in each facility, looking at the legend, so you have blue showing as the legal coordinator, red as the officer who was the Spanish speaker, and the PIC clerk as the Spanish speaker. At EMTC, at the time of our assessment, it was only the person in custody who works in the law library that spoke Spanish. At NIC, only the officer. At NIC Maine, we had all three categories available that spoke Spanish. At RMSC, only the legal coordinator. RNDC, only the legal coordinator. And at West Facility Annex, only the legal coordinator. So with regard to, sorry, hold on one second. Slides mixed up a little bit here. So when it comes to Spanish language support, the board standards require the department to provide assistance to Spanish-speaking people in custody by employees who are fluent in Spanish. The department's policies highlights the need to place some legal coordinators who can speak Spanish. The policy also allows for trained people in custody assistants who are fluent in Spanish to assist those in need of those services. And again, as we went through the slides, the department provides Spanish-speaking support during the time of our second assessment at 6 of the 8 facilities assessed. There were 0 at GRVC, RESH, and West Facility, and only the person in custody who worked in the law library could provide Spanish-speaking assistance at EMTC. And now we're looking at scheduling. And scheduling is an important piece because, again, we talked about overlap, where our standards requires that any facility that houses 600 and above have at least 10 hours of law library services, and any facility 600 and below would have at about 8 hours of law library services available to the population. So the board standards requires the department to maintain scheduling practices that provide people in custody access during times of the day when other activities such as recreation, meals, schools, sick call, and etc. are not scheduled. So again, as you saw in the previous slides, I broke it down into those 3 sections to again highlight and inform you on what those areas are and what they mean. So again, other services, board staff reviewed facility program schedules. We looked at overlapping occurred. We saw that overlapping occurred in multiple facilities, and specifically, oddly enough, with religious services. There was an inconsistent schedule format where when we tried to assess all the schedules along each other, there wasn't a consistent format for them all. When it comes to schedules and logbooks, people in custody are not held to task to properly record their times in the logbook. There's no uniformity in logbook record keeping, and the logbook times do not always match the session time posted on the law library schedule. And so when it comes to staffing, In the last assessment, law library posts was shift reduced often. Again, as I shared earlier, the department during that first assessment was continuing to go through the absentee staff and a whole host of other issues when it came to staffing. In the second assessment, we found that there was a less frequent shift reduction across all facilities. Staff are more steady and established in their understanding of law library procedures. Another thing that we didn't hear much about in this second assessment was issues when it came to escorting. And now with reference to notary publics, the department mandates that all department staff assigned to law library posts be New York State licensed notary publics. Officers are removed from the post if notary licenses is not acquired within a certain time frame. Again, as you saw in the previous slides, we broke it down into those 3 sections to again help you to understand, as this is a lot of information. So who is a notary in the law library? The legal coordinator and also the uniformed staff person assigned to the post. What items get notarized? Legal documents submitted by people in custody, such as briefs, motions, Article 78s, and also letters that require proof of signature. And lastly, when it comes to license status, law library staff are required to maintain their notary status while assigned to the post. In the first assessment, there were a number of law library uniform staff that did not have active notary licenses. But in the second assessment, staff found a great number of uniform law library staff that had active notary licenses. And so our next slides have to touch on recommendations from our findings. And so when it comes to equipment, the department should consider contracting with new kiosk vendors with greater capacity to repair damaged equipment in a timely manner. Also, when it comes to promoting the use of law library services, less than 6% of the incarcerated population access the law library, while the majority of population held in custody are detainees. So it's important for these men and women to go to the law library and even know that it exists. Notary publics, that the department may consider reviewing notary public licenses to ensure that all DOC personnel assigned to law library have active notary public licenses. And also when it comes to education refresher, the department should consider conducting annual law library operation refreshers, possibly even biannual operation refreshers for uniform and non-uniform law library staff. With regard to scheduling, the department should consider performing quarterly program schedule reviews to assess for mandated services overlap and continuity of service. In the area of legal research and education, the department may consider increasing law library education outside of the law library, i.e. in housing units. This may increase awareness and access to those PICs who are new to the carceral setting. And to give you a quick story, I toured EMTC's law library last week and kind of had a conversation with a few men that were in that law library. One of them was there and he said he didn't know what was happening. And the other person in custody who had encouraged him to come said that he was laying on his bed and he didn't know what was going on with his case. When I told him about the law library, he said he didn't know anything about it, so I drug him down here. So again, it continues to, this is what this education piece highlights, the need for increasing the awareness of the law library and the services that it provides. And this last set of recommendations, outside reporting transparency, where the department should report repair delays and service delivery issues to the board in a reasonable time. When it comes to kiosks, the department should consider increasing the number of kiosks in largely populated facilities, as we saw when it came to EMTC and I believe OBCC as well. Signatures and record keeping, that the department should improve people in custody signing in and signing out with times and session indications. Copy machines, the department should consider reviewing vendor contracts to consider new equipment, which is more durable and user-friendly for consistent use. With regard to RESH, the department should consider hiring a legal coordinator specifically for RESH, because currently, and I tip my hat to the men and women who are doing it, it is the law library officers who go back and forth to RMSC's law library to collect information and bring it back to the individuals in custody. And that's how they, the folks who are housed in RESH are getting that service. And the last recommendation actually comes from a person in custody with regard to laptops, where he suggests considering increasing the size and quality of the laptops for use in reviewing discovery. And that's all I have for you today. Again, thank you for placing this issue on the agenda. Department, I continue to thank you. We continue to thank you for the continued collaboration and addressing some of these issues. And we look forward to continuing to tackling these issues head on. Thank you.
I'd just like, if there's any opportunity for questions for the board, to Director Johnson. Dr. Cohen?
Thank you very much. That was very, very informative. I have a few questions. The information that you found, the good and the bad and the recommendations, was there a parallel process ongoing by the Department of Correction if you hadn't been there?
Not that we found, although we, throughout the course of the first assessment, even into the second assessment, we continue to keep an open line of communication. So whenever we found any issues in real time, we communicated it to the department.
Of course, you're provided to them, but they don't have a system of making sure that, of identifying these problems, which you knew existed before, and fixing them.
So what I'll say is I can't unequivocally say yes or no. But what I do know is that in conversation with legal coordinators and law library staff, they've shared that they communicate whatever issues they have with their higher ups, and then that's how it would essentially work. And I know the Department of Programming is hands-on when it comes to working with staff and when it comes to organizing scheduling. So I can't unequivocally say no, but I also can't necessarily say yes, but I know that there are lines of communication that are open to discuss those things.
And you did not include in your presentation a discussion of tablets, which I believe are one of the ways that that persons in custody can have access to. I read in reports by the staff that I think in RESH, tablets have been removed. Does that affect access to law library? And do you know why that was done?
So I'm not sure why the tablets were taken away. I know, well, no, let me go back to go forward. I want to say at the end of last year, the beginning of this year, some of the people in custody were manipulating the tablets and causing fires. So for those that were found that had been the cause of the fire, those tablets were taken away. Also, but then I'm not sure where the guidance came to take tablets away. I do know that there are still people who are at RESH who do have tablets. Not everyone has them. And with regard to law library services on the tablet, so the reason that we didn't include it in this report is because our standard doesn't speak to affording law library services via tablet. It speaks to affording it in person for the 2-hour duration at minimum. And also the department's policies don't speak to affording law library via the tablets as well. I think it's an idea that could be explored a little bit deeper. I know there is some level of access, but again, we continue to believe that the physical presence in the law library is a lot more effective, where a person can have a conversation with a legal coordinator and someone who's trained in shepherdizing and breaking down some of the case law that can help them. Although again, the tablet can be used as a supplement. It just has to be looked at and how that's used.
And you noted that there were no kiosks in EMTC. Why?
So from what we were told, a lot of those kiosks, what would happen is when people in custody would come to use them, whenever if there was a glitch or something, they would try to fix it themselves. And then them trying to fix it themselves, they would essentially just make the situation worse. And then when it came, so then after the department would reach out to their vendor to come and fix it, the same issue would keep happening. So again, we had a conversation with law library leadership who shared that they are going to look deeper at the training that they give the people in custody who are assigned to those posts so that they understand how to effectively teach others how to use it and also how to use it themselves.
So to understand, the MTC kiosks were removed because they were, they broke.
Right.
And they have not been replaced because the reason they broke, the department feels, is because the people in custody broke them.
No, they have been replaced.
Oh, they
Yeah,
have been
yeah,
replaced.
they have been replaced. Yeah,
Oh, I thought you said
they've
there
been
were no
fixed.
kiosks.
At the time of the assessment, yes,
Oh, I
yeah,
see.
but they have been.
Okay, is that the case in any other facilities where where kiosks break with
Yes.
frequency of the MTC?
Yeah, frequency, I can't say unequivocally, but kiosks do appear to be an issue across all of the facilities when it comes to law library.
Well, and again, thank you so much for this.
Sure, of
All
course.
right,
Thank you.
Any other questions? Felipe?
Hello. You mentioned the importance of having like guidance or someone to talk to besides maybe tablets. I mean, based on the interviews and talking to people in custody and knowing that actually we talked before about the long length of stay, the court process. I don't know, any insight? Why are they not using it?
You're saying why they're not using the law
Yeah,
library?
why such a small percentage of folks are using the law library services?
Yeah, we're not 100% sure. What we're believing is that they simply just don't know that it exists. That's why we're suggesting that maybe the department could do something within that orientation period when a person first comes into custody, because the population is huge. There are a number of people who are detained who this is their first time, so they don't know. So it's almost like depending on on your peer to instruct you on what's available to you. Also, there may be a heavy reliance on the handbooks to instruct folks on what's available to them. But unfortunately, there are other issues there where maybe it comes to not being able to read certain, to a certain grade level. So that help is definitely needed. But again, when it comes to why, we haven't necessarily identified exactly why, but just that there's a need.
Thank you.
Sure.
Sounds to be so many good opportunities.
Board Member
Yeah,
Pitts?
of course.
Quick question. How do we know the real percentage and what it means? For instance, your report basically says 5% of the population, right? It sounds like a low number, but is it really a low number? Do we have anything to compare it to? Prior to when things were working, when the staffing was good,
Yeah.
prior to the pandemic, staffing was good and things were in place. What percentage of the population use law library?
So that's a good question. We didn't look at that.
I think we should.
Yes.
And then we'll know really what 5% means.
Yeah, right. You look at the past versus the present to see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's something that the department can answer. I know we haven't looked at that to see what the prior law library usage was. The way we looked at it was we looked at the 24-hour reports, which are generated the day after to just report how many people actually accessed it. So it may be having to go back that far to see. But again, that's for us, we don't have the manpower to do that. And of course, maybe the department has a better way of tracking it. Yeah, yeah, because we're doing paper, just reviewing paper. But yeah, of
Yes,
course.
thank you, Board Member Pitts. Vice Chair Skipper?
Good afternoon. I just have a couple of questions. My first question is, I know you mentioned availability and scheduling. I don't believe I heard anything about evening availability and also weekend availability. The reason being, there are other programs going on. People are going out to court. People are going to medical appointments. There should be weekend and evening availability to law library services. My next question is the training of persons in custody to become law library clerks. I don't know the exact terminology of that. I know that I took that while I was a person in custody. And I want to know, what is the schedule for that? How the trainings are run by via facility? Like, how many trainings does RMSC have? How many trainings does GRVC have, EMTC, so forth and so on? And what is the schedule? Is this done quarterly? Is this done every 6 months? And how is this being bridged?
Vice Chair Skip, there is some noise in the background. I don't know if it's in the room or on your side.
It is probably on my side, so I'm going to finish and turn off my mic. But I'd be really interested in learning the answers to these questions, and if we don't have them, I need these answers.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair Skip. So with regard to law library services, it operates Tuesday through Saturday, right? So you have, so the law library is closed on Sunday and Monday. And then when it comes to the hours, again, it's according to the population. So more than 600, you can go up to 10 hours. Less than that, it's about 8 hours. So it is offered and it goes into the evening hours. So for that, that's the response for when it comes to the weekend service. So it's there. It's just not for both Saturday and Sunday. It's only for Saturday. And then with regard to training, I'm assuming the training you're referring to is not the legal research training. It's training for the people in custody who work in the law library. Is that correct?
I want to say it's both. I want to
Both.
definitely say it's both. Legal research training and also the training so that people in custody can actually make themselves available and try to help with the staffing issues. And actually work and learn a career trade.
Yeah. So again, a good question. So what we found when it came to legal research classes, again, I believe that the pandemic played a part in the delays when it came to legal research trainings, because our standards require that it happens quarterly, essentially every 3 months, that legal research classes should be conducted. What we found when we looked into it to ask about when the last one was had, some of the coordinators couldn't answer when the last one was. The last I could say was 2019. Since our assessment, the department has rolled out a plan to conduct that those legal research classes. I want to say some of them started last month. So there's a plan there to reinstate them. But with regard to training for the clerks, that we're not sure of. As the board, we're not sure of.
Thank you. I need to see that plan for the reinstatement of those classes. Really curious as to trying to understand why the last one happened in 2019 and we're already in 2024, moving into 2025. So I need to see that plan. Thank you.
Of course. I again say it may have something to do with the pandemic, but again, I don't want to speak for the department. I know they're here and they can definitely respond to those questions. But again, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Vice Chair Skipper. I have one.
Oh, sure.
Are there any other questions before? In your briefing before this board meeting, to board members, I had questions regarding tablets and a greater use of tablets for law library and its effectiveness. Board Member Pitts did indicate 5%. And what does that mean? To me, 5% is 5%, and I think it's a very low number. What can we do? What do you need? And I think I asked this on the briefing from this board to move forward minimum standards that will bring about further use of tablets and to bring that percentage up.
Yeah, that's it.
Now, you also stated that you feel it's better in person. Is there chat functions on tablets? Is there other things with experts on the line that some people in custody don't like to move around to go to law library. They feel more secure, in their housing unit. That's not everyone, but I know that some don't. what do you need from us so that we can increase these numbers?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, it was good when you posed it when we did the prep as well. So, I continue to share that one, it would be important for the department to have something in writing when it comes to the tablets, to have maybe a policy that indicates if the tablet is broken, who is responsible, and all those things. I know we've had a number of conversations and have built a good rapport with the tablet team when it comes to assessing some of those issues, but specifically when it comes to law library services. I know when Resh first opened up, I believe it was Securus had to come in to install something because the people in custody who were housed there were not able to access law library services because I think there was something in the network they hadn't opened up or something like that. But since then, they've been able to fix it. So I think it would be for the board, it would be to encourage the department to put together a policy around the tablets and also to develop a plan on, because it's a good idea to have a chat on there, because it is true there are some people who would rather be in the comfort of their, and I use that term loosely, in the comfort of their housing area to review their whatever cases or case law is available, and even a chat function. I haven't seen that on the tablet. I do think it's innovative. It's something that could be done. But again, then the other part of it is also the board reviewing our standards to see how we can implement other uses of technology to be able to offer law library services to the population. So I think it can be an ongoing conversation. But yeah, I think again, it's a good recommendation to supplement what's happening within the law library service, the in-person law library service. Awesome. Thank you. Of course. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Jasmine, for the BOC executive overview of the department. At this time, we'll ask the Department of Correction to come forward to talk about the DOC law library procedures, preliminary findings from DOC investigation into deadlocking incidents at GRVC, and DOC policies, procedures for servicing people in custody who are deaf or hard of hearing.
Good afternoon, members of the board. My name is Valerie Graysock, Assistant Commissioner for the Division of Programs and Community Partnerships. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today about law library services, which are an ingrained part of the board's minimum standards, as well as the department's day-to-day operations. We understand how critical it is for people in custody to have access to these services. The COVID-19 pandemic forced many changes to how programming and services, including law library services, were offered for a time to protect the health of everyone living and working in our facilities. Yet in 2023, in-person law library service has been restored department-wide. Service schedules and sign-up sheets are now posted in housing areas, and individuals can also access legal research through LexisNexis on their tablets. Schedules are created in line with the board's minimum standards, and every effort is made to deconflict scheduling with other mandated services, all while ensuring that accessibility and security are prioritized as part of the process. To further support this effort, we appointed a new Deputy Director of Law Library to support our legal coordinators and reinforce compliance with these standards. Each facility has at least one dedicated law library, and in 2023, we established a new law library in West Annex. Additionally, we began the process to ensure additional new law libraries in select facilities. As the board noted in its most recent assessment that we received last Friday, we've made significant progress in minimizing shift reductions for law library officers who play an essential role in ensuring consistent access to these services. We will continue to strengthen our law library services while addressing any outstanding challenges. This includes ensuring adherence to our schedules, eliminating any remaining conflicts with other mandated services, filling our legal coordinator vacancies, and establishing additional law library sites. In addition, I think this is an opportunity to think about how we leverage technology to support this essential service. We're reviewing the recommendations outlined in the recent report and welcome the opportunity to discuss them further with the board. At first glance, we agree with some of these recommendations, as we had already taken the necessary steps to address them, such as purchasing additional laptops, conducting regular schedule reviews, and supporting staff in ensuring that people in custody sign in and out of law library sessions. We will continue to assess the board's recommendations and engage with you as we progress. Finally, as you know, under Commissioner McGinley-Leedy's leadership, the department has commenced a minimum standards audit, which will include law library services. We will keep the board informed as we make progress on that front. We hope that our partnership in this area yields more robust access for the people in custody. Thank you for the time to speak, and I welcome any questions you may have.
Thank you, Judge Kutsif.
We certainly, I think, agree with you that law library services are really fundamental to PICs having due process. Very important. Obviously, this was a small sample and may not be representative, but the idea of whether it's 5% or 10% or even 25% utilization is really troubling, because it would represent a severe underutilization of library services. So my first question is, your reference to library officers and the recent hiring of additional library officers, are those the equivalent of the legal coordinators?
Thank you for your question, board member. Just to clarify, we haven't hired additional officers, but we made sure that officers are in place to escort individuals to and from law library. And as the assessment report mentioned, we reduced shift reductions so that we do have consistent, steady officers to bring people. And as the presentation earlier highlighted, escorts haven't really been mentioned as an issue, which is something that we've worked hard to resolve.
Now, again, based upon the standards, in-person access is the standard. And therefore, the hope is that there's been expanded in-person access in non-restrictive areas. We understand, at least from this study, that there's still remote access only in a number of non-restrictive areas. Now, particularly on the issue of RESH, the fact is, has a legal coordinator been assigned to RESH?
Yes. We've always had legal coordinators assigned to RESH, and we presently have 2 legal coordinators assigned to RESH as well.
And that person or those persons are available to the PICs to assist them?
Yes, so RESH is one of the locations where we're authorized to provide services via slips. And so individuals can request assistance using slips. Legal coordinators conduct that research and provide the materials. And I do want to clarify that individuals in RESH do have access to tablets with LexisNexis.
And my question with respect to tablets is, do the tablets provide equivalent databases to what is available in the kiosks?
Yes. The LexisNexis is the software that's available on the kiosk, and it's also available on the tablets.
The other issue I wanted to raise is really the issue of education. And that seems to be critical in terms of the PIC population. It seems that there needs to be more uniformity with respect to education at orientation intake. And I don't think just references in the handbook or referral to the handbook is sufficient, because there are many PICs who are not going to be able to follow the handbook, to be very honest. And there are some technical issues involved. So I think that, orientation intake has to incorporate some education on legal access to the law library and legal research. Again, also, the question becomes, have the periodic legal research courses resumed, and how often are they taking place?
Thank you, board member, for the questions. So we agree that it's really important to provide orientation during the new admission process. And we actually have a staff member, actually several staff members that conduct those orientations. They go over all of the programs and services that we have available, including law library. So that's absolutely in place, and we agree that that's really important. And we began resuming offering legal research classes in October.
Also, the issue of sign-in sheets. It would seem that with respect to sign-in sheets and scheduling, there should be uniformity between the various areas. That, it cannot be ad hoc in terms of each area, so that all of the PICs will be aware that this is sign-in, and this is where you sign in and where you can access the information. And also the same thing with regard to scheduling. And I think that that's, again, critical with respect to the education aspect of this.
And we recognize that sign-in sheets and schedules are a critical part of the operation, and there has to be uniformity. Making sure that sign-up sheets are posted in housing areas has actually been a priority of ours. Our executive directors of programs regularly tour housing areas to make sure that sign-up sheets are up, making sure that schedules are up. And we appreciate that the most recent assessment from the board highlighted that we made improvement in the sign-up sheets. So we are ensuring that they are, that schedules and sign-up sheets are uniform and posted across the board.
And my last question and issue is Spanish-speaking legal coordinators or access to at least Spanish-speaking trained personnel in all areas. What is the status with respect to that? Because obviously, at least based upon the report, there are some areas where there's very limited access or no access.
Yes, thank you for that question. We are still reviewing the report and making sure that we have Spanish-speaking staff members is a priority for us. So that's something we'll be taking a look at. But at first glance, as the report indicated, there was someone in most law libraries available to assist. But this is an area of priority for us, and we'll definitely be working on it.
Again, the question of someone available to assist. Obviously, someone available to assist is better than no one, but it just seems to me the preference would be someone who is actually trained, and therefore either a legal coordinator or a trained uniformed officer, rather than just a PIC. Because of course there are other issues with respect to translation, et cetera, that may occur, and understanding with respect to PIC only. So I think that, again, that should not be, when we talk about, having someone available, there needs to be someone in addition to a PIC.
We're definitely looking at that. Thank you.
Board Member Jude.
Thank you. The percentage of utilization seems surprisingly low. Could you share, to the best of your knowledge, what would account for such low usage?
Yes, thank you for that question. So historically, prior to the pandemic, our utilization was around 8%. Now it's decreased to around 5%. I imagine part of that is because we've given individuals tablets that have access to LexisNexis. Some of the individuals who were primarily coming to use the kiosk for LexisNexis are now likely using their tablets. We are continuing to ensure access, and there are certain areas where we're going to be working on diligently in the coming weeks and months to expand access. So it is our goal to increase utilization, but we also really want to leverage technology and really explore how we can utilize technology to support people more.
In follow-up to Board Member Jude's question, is there policy development around tablets that Director Augustine was addressing in his presentation?
Yeah, so when people damage their tablets, we look into what may have happened. If a person damaged their own tablet, it may or may not be replaced because it is a privileged. At times it is replaced, but there is a practice in place to replace tablets.
Is there a policy being developed to address tablets, or is just practice?
I don't want to misspeak. Allow me to get back to you on that afterwards.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Board Member Felipe.
Thank you for your testimony. Those are really good news that LexisNexis is available to everyone. Do you have analytics to know how many of the people in custody are accessing LexisNexis through the tablet?
That's something we could look into and get back to you.
That would be very helpful. But maybe that's a way of expanding it. And then once you get access to LexisNexis, you get access to everything LexisNexis. You could go to the research at Medline, you can do the paper. Wow.
Yes, that's correct.
Amazing. I mean,
Excuse me, could you turn your mic on? I don't think it's on. And
hello, can you hear me? No, thank you for your testimony. And it's amazing that people in custody can get access to LexisNexis and all the other good stuff that is available through that. Is there like a class to understand the power behind LexisNexis? I mean, is there like a course that people can take on how to do the research, how to do the searches, which I think is what the judge was alluding to?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So we've resumed conducting quarterly legal research classes in October. So that's part of it. And we can explore additional opportunities for training on LexisNexis. Thank you.
You could maybe try to get us the data of the number of folks or the amount of time that people are actually using LexisNexis for research?
Yes.
If you could,
We'll look into that.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
any other questions on law library? Alderman McCohen.
Just very briefly, are you in touch with Legal Aid Society regarding the law library?
The department works very closely with legal aid on different matters, including law library.
Thank you.
Okay, no other questions. Board Member Jude Tosa.
Thank you. In regards to the service contracts, because I saw that there were several broken or inoperable kiosks or typewriters, how is that working?
So thank you for your question. We saw that in the report. We're still reviewing the report and we'll be getting back to you. But I will mention, just because it's something we've started working on, we do have a vendor that we work with to repair kiosks, and we already started looking into purchasing potentially new equipment to minimize damage and expedite repairs. Thank you.
Any other questions on law library? Okay, thank you. There being none.
Thank you.
We'll go into preliminary findings from DOC's investigation into deadlocking incidents at GRVC.
Good afternoon. Is it on? Can you hear me? All right, so I'm gonna make my remarks and also address the deadlocking issue. Good afternoon, members of the board. I'm Commissioner Linnell McGinley Liddy, and I would like to thank you for the opportunity to provide updates today. First, I would like to thank the board for acknowledging the retired members of service we have lost since our last meeting. Their dedication and contributions to the department will always be remembered and their loved ones remain in our thoughts and prayers. I would also like to take the opportunity today to highlight some recent developments at the department. On October 18th, we hosted a graduation ceremony for 84 new correction officers who have successfully completed their rigorous academy training program. We applaud these men and women for committing themselves to public service in one of the toughest and most important jobs in law enforcement. These new officers are already welcome onto the job by their peers and will continue to receive training and mentorship from the academy in the weeks, months, and years to come. We look forward to supporting them as they grow in their roles. I'm also pleased to announce 2 new members of our senior leadership team. Mr. Eric M. Taylor, whose name may ring a bell, was appointed as Deputy Commissioner of Custody Management, Classification, and Facility Operations. Mr. Taylor brings a wealth of experience, including a distinguished career with the department, where he retired as Chief of Department in 1998. In addition, Mr. James Walsh was appointed Deputy Commissioner of Security Operations. Mr. Walsh is also returning to the department, having previously served as Deputy Commissioner for Adult Programming. We're excited to have them both back with us, eager to learn from their experience and look forward to the important contributions they will make in their new roles. Last month, the CARE unit hosted its annual domestic violence event at the GMDC Wellness Center. Anyone can be a victim of domestic violence or know of a victim of domestic violence in need of support. And sadly, this can include members of our boldest family. This event served as an important opportunity to support and empower any staff members currently or previously experiencing domestic violence and provide them with vital resources. Our event included guest speakers, testimonials, and valuable information. I am proud that we can continue to support our staff through these events, and I'm committed to continuing that support in these efforts. Looking ahead, this Friday, November 15th, we will host one of the department's most prestigious events, our Medal Day ceremony. Medal Day is an opportunity to honor and recognize our heroic staff who have gone above and beyond for our population, for their colleagues, or for the community. We will also honor staff members who have achieved educational excellence and acknowledge our essential support units that help us run this agency every single day. As I always say, heroes work at the Department of Correction. We look forward to celebrating the outstanding contributions of New York's boldest. I must also address the testimony we heard during last month's meeting regarding alleged deadlocking in DOC facilities. In response to these troubling allegations, I immediately referred the matter to the Department of Investigation for further independent investigation. I want to assure the public and board that the department will not tolerate unauthorized lock-ins. As the matter is still under investigation, I cannot provide further details at this time. The department remains committed to transparency, and we will share updates when we can. In the meantime, we have messaged during our staff leadership meetings the importance of adhering to department lockout policies and reminded facility leadership that any unauthorized lock-ins will be investigated swiftly. We also issued a teletype department-wide to all staff, reiterating that any and all lock-ins must be within policy and unauthorized lock-ins are prohibited. Again, I take this matter seriously, and we will continue to ensure staff compliant with department procedures. If you have any questions, please let me know.
Dr. Cohen,
Thank you very much, Commissioner.
please turn your mic on.
I did want to, I did note a policy or directive that the department issued requiring that issues of lock-in, inappropriate lock-in should be documented, or even lock-in should be documented in the log and in the computer system. I thought that was a good idea, and I think it'll give you the information that you need. I'm glad. I mean, DOI is a criminal investigation. That's why I believe that that's what DOI does. I would imagine that there would be a need for you to have an internal investigation about this issue, and it's may not be a good idea to give it over to DOI, which can take a long period of time, in my experience, and not resolve the issues at hand.
Well,
And
Dr. Cohen,
yes.
I'm following up with DOI,
Yeah.
so
Okay.
this is something that's ongoing and ongoing discussions with DOI.
Okay, that's great.
So I don't anticipate it to be a long one.
That's great. And then one question which I asked you before, but you were not standing up. Why is the department asking for, what emergency is the department declaring is the basis for the department's declaration every 4 days that there should be an emergency order suspending multiple Board of Correction rules, including very important issues around lockout, around representation, due process, and around special housing?
So
Is there an emergency that you?
In the request, it is clearly detailed why we're requesting the emergency. And what is delineated in the request is what exists.
Could you just dive a little bit?
I don't have the request in front of me, but I'm happy to go over it with you offline. But the request that is documented every 5 days, all the things that are delineated in that request, that's what exists for the Department of Corrections.
So you have a continuing emergency because?
Dr. Cohen?
I'm talking to the commissioner.
I understand, but I want to give other board members, we can come back. You asked like 3 questions. I like to go to other board members, and if you want to come back, we can.
I don't think that's appropriate that I'm just in
Well,
the middle of
it's not your determination to determine what's appropriate in my.
I said my
request.
thoughts. I didn't say.
And I said mine. sir.
determination.
Any other questions for the commissioner? I have a question for you, Commissioner. Regarding the referral to DOI. In my touring of facilities, I know that I've raised what I thought was an issue. And now that I know it's deadlocking. I want to see full accountability. And that means expanding the investigation to all parties, even the Board of Correction, with respect to what was done, what was not done to prevent such activities from happening. I believe in full accountability. And so as you and these discussions go on with DOI, or if they like discussions with me or this board, I certainly would entertain that. But full accountability is certainly important in my mind.
Okay, sure.
Dr. Cohen.
I believe that in the emergency declaration that the mayor issues based upon your request every 4 or 5 days, one of the reasons that you give is that there are insufficient staff.
That is correct.
No, to run the department. And that has been the case since September 2021. These emergency declarations have been renewed every 4 or 5 days since September of 2021. Maybe you have too many people to take care of. If the department does not have the staff required to run the agency without having lock-in, without due process, without having due process for people who are accused of violations of department policies, doesn't that suggest that that's a very important part of you running a safe organization? You have to have those are critical issues. I assume you believe that. If not, you'll let me know. But if the department's population is too large for your ability to recruit staff, I think the department should seriously consider decreasing the number of people under your custody, because it doesn't sound like it's a safe situation.
So in our variance request that was submitted, like we said, since January 1st, 2022, the population has increased 26%. And what we're doing is we're looking at it holistically. Again, working with our partners at OCA, who just announced last month that they were going to take a look at some of these cases that have been languishing for some time. They're going to start with cases in Brooklyn. So we are making strides, we're making steps to ensuring that people have, their cases are being reviewed, and they're being reviewed in an expeditious manner. Also, I'm also looking at people that can be released 6A. Since becoming commissioner, I've released 45 people, right? There are some limitations there, but that's also a very small percentage of the population. But we're looking at everything possible. In coming to you today for that request, we didn't just take it lightly. We looked at it holistically and also worked with the other oversight authority, SCOC, State Commission on Correction, right? There are housing areas that we would like to open up, but we need their approval and we need to conduct construction in those areas before that can actually be done. But this is something that we're all thinking about and we're all taking it very seriously. Staff attrition is a real thing. Working in jails are extremely challenging for individuals, and we're continuing to do the best we can in terms of recruiting, but we also need to do retention. And so we're looking at this holistically. How can we ensure that the department is run safely? We need to support our staff, and that's the vein that we've been working in.
I appreciate that. Are you reporting it? Can attrition levels be reported to the board?
We'll discuss that a little further.
I'm going to move forward, Dr. Cohen. Vice Chair Skip.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Commissioner McGinney Lidley. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Taking a page out of Member Cohen's remarks about accountability, I don't believe I heard whether during this investigation that you've had, whether this practice has been ongoing. And I think accountability should be the first step. If you are doing that or members of your staff are doing that, I think we need to hear that, yes, this practice has been happening. And here is their solutions to ensure that the practice does not happen any further. So my question to you is, has this practice been happening?
I was not aware of the practice happening. Upon hearing the allegations, I referred it to DOI. I also issued a teletype. We've issued instructions. We have senior leadership touring. If it does occur, it will be investigated and people will be held accountable for that.
Thank you, Commissioner, but that's not what I asked. I asked you, has this been happening?
I'm not aware of it happening.
And in your course of your investigation, it was not brought to light that this is actually a practice that's been happening.
So I don't know if you heard me, but I referred this matter to the Department of Investigation, who's looking into the matter. So I'm not aware of their results at this point in time, but when I do receive them, I will share it with the board forthwith.
Thank you. When do you think these results will come in?
I am not certain of that.
Thank you. We need to get a definite timeline of this investigation, what it entails, who is being investigating, who is doing the investigating. And I expect the board should receive a full report, but thank you for all
Yeah.
that you're doing.
Vice Chair, I think that an investigation, it's perhaps a confidential investigation, and those matters will not be made available until a findings or report or some indictment is put forward or resolution. But I would
Thank
like
you
to
for the
note-
clarification,
Yes.
Board Chair.
You're welcome. I would like to note to the technical staff, with respect to the remote, I don't think it's appropriate that thumbs go up and down or acknowledgements. So if that feature can be disabled on the remote aspect, it's on her end. Okay, so if you can disable the thumbs ups and things of that nature, or because that goes to the decorum of the session. So I appreciate that, Vice Chair. Okay. Any other questions for the commissioner regarding deadlocking? Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
And we'll go, well, before you even sit down, Commissioner, I just wanted to say, I really appreciate that you're bringing in seasoned staff. That's been the hallmark of the department, bringing them back, because I find that when you have those institutions in the facilities and on property, your younger staff and senior, your senior leadership team can really learn, and that knowledge can be transferred. A lot of that's lost because it's not in books many times, and it's in those individuals. So I congratulate you on your leadership in that area.
Thank you.
DOC policies, procedures for servicing people in custody who are deaf or hard of hearing.
Good afternoon. My name is James Saunders. I'm the Deputy Commissioner, Health Affairs, Compliance, and Quality. Thank you again for having me back to follow up on this item. So if you recall last month, October 8th, I shared with you the department's work to support persons in custody with special needs or disabilities. And I had then noted that approximately 10% of those in calendar year 2024 requiring reasonable accommodation related to hearing impaired individuals in custody. So the department recognizes that persons who are hearing impaired may require certain special accommodations. And while all persons in custody are given a classification score, housing determinations of PICs who are hearing impaired are made on a case-by-case basis. So this work is collaborative between DOC and our colleagues and Correctional Health Service. And I just want to bring to the board's attention Directive 3802, Revision B, which specifically addresses ADA requirements, and that policy is called Non-Discrimination of Individuals with Disabilities. So I think that it follows up on the board's request for policy related to hearing impaired individuals. Are there any other questions related to this subject that I can share? No? All right.
Thank you,
Thank you so
Deputy
much.
Commissioner.
Thank you very much.
Any questions from the board to the Deputy Commissioner, Sanders? Okay, thank you. And I believe that is it for the department. So thank you for your summary and presentation. And now CHS updates. And we'll start with policies, procedures regarding mental observation units, PACE and CAPS.
Hi, Beepin Subedi, CMO for CHS. And can we please bring the slides up? Thank you. Next slide. So as requested by the board, I'll be providing an overview of the treatment that we provide on mental health therapeutic housing units with a specific focus on PACE and CAPS, and we'll also talk about medication delivery on those units, and I'll give some outcome data too. So great. So before I speak about our therapeutic housing units, I think it's important to have an overview of all the services we provide and where the therapeutic housing units fit in. So everyone who is seen, who comes into the jail is seen for medical intake and then is screened for referral to mental health. What we've tried to work on for the last several years is to see as many individuals as possible in real time right after medical intake. We find that helps us increase our access numbers and then to make sure we evaluate someone's mental health needs early incarceration. In addition, though, for those who may not screen for mental health problems and on admission, we have several other pathways to be referred to us, and that includes calling our health triage line. So once someone is seen for mental health evaluation, the focus is to perform a comprehensive assessment. We get a history, diagnose an individual, develop a treatment plan. But what's different in our setting is that we also make recommendations for where the care should occur. And there's two major kind of settings or way that we deliver care in CHS. One is through general population clinics, that's like an outpatient clinic, and the other is through our therapeutic housing units, and that includes MO, PACE, and CAPS units. The major difference, and I'll get into details about this as we go on, but in general population clinics, that's for individuals who may have lower kind of mental health needs or lower risk. They're brought to a clinic to be seen, whereas on our therapeutic housing units, individuals with higher level mental health needs are housed together. We provide treatment on site. And there's several benefits to the mental health therapeutic housing units. One is increased access because we're not relying on someone being brought to the clinic. We can go on site and see individuals there. It also allows us to see individuals at higher frequency in GP. And I'll get to details about that also. Also allows us to have groups and other treatment interventions. And then on the units, since we are there on site, we are seeing the patients more regularly. There's just enhanced clinical observation. So we're able to know our patients better, and if there's any subtle changes in their presentation, allows us to act right away and then change our treatment plan accordingly. So in summary, our general population clinics, at minimum, individuals are seen monthly by a clinician and a psychiatric provider. On the mental observation units, the visits themselves, as well as medication administration, occurs primarily on the unit. I'll get to details about this later. And at minimum, in terms of the treatment frequency, individuals are seen every day for mental health rounding. They're seen weekly by clinicians, at least every 2 weeks by a psychiatric provider, and then there's also groups and creative arts therapists. The PACE units, which are our higher level of therapeutic housing unit, offer the same thing that all the same services that an MO unit offers. But in addition, we have staff on site for about 16 hours a day. So rather than just coming on and off the unit, we have steady staff on site to monitor and then work closely with the patients. And that's primarily mental health treatment aides, as well as nursing staff. And then we also work closely with steady officers who work with our staff on site. So here is a graph looking at access to services. This is just for mental health services on PACE units. So the bottom line, is all other types of units. The top line is looking at the percentage of completed visits for mental health visits on PACE units. You'll see it hovers around 90%. And is much higher. So it just speaks to the benefit of cohorting individuals and the increased access and frequency of visits that occur on PACE units. So in terms of medication administration, and we talked about this a little bit during the last board meeting, medications are provided directly to patients on the unit in designated areas. And then we have mental health staff on site on the PACE units, as I mentioned earlier, to work both with the staff administering the medication, but also working with patients to help improve compliance and adherence to medication. What's different on the PACE units is because we have staff on site, including nursing staff, that if someone doesn't receive medication during distribution time, we're able to hold on to that medication and then give it to the patient later. Right? And there can be many reasons why someone may not be able to get medication during distribution time. They may be sleeping, they may be tired, they may not want to interact with someone else who's on the unit. So it provides us with the flexibility to get that medication to the patient in a way that works for them. And you see that demonstrated in our medication adherence numbers. So this, again, the top line is PACE. The bottom line are all units other than PACE. And this looks at medication compliance for psychiatric medications, as well as medications for chronic medical conditions. And you'll see on the PACE units, we have upwards of 80% compliance, for both medical and mental health meds. And that varies across PACE units. When we look at actually individual units and look at mental health medication compliance, in some units it goes up to in the 90s. So it really can vary. It depends on the patient population that's there. And then lastly, next I'll talk about mental health rounding. This also came up during the board meeting. As I said earlier, staff on the units round every day. And part of what we try to do is encourage patients to leave their room. One symptom of mental illness can be isolation. So part of the treatment model on PACE units is to have patients leave their room, be part of the milieu, and engage in treatment. So individuals who have been noted to be in their cell for more than 3 times during rounds are then reviewed by supervisors, and then we think of other possible interventions, such as changes in the treatment plan. So that just helps us kind of routinely monitor, then think about other therapeutic interventions as needed for individuals. And I think a couple things to highlight. These observations that we make, they're a point in time. So they don't distinguish between voluntary and involuntarily being in one cell. We just note that someone's in their cell. And regardless, our goal is to have people be out, even if it's voluntary isolation. And then it also doesn't account for people who are out of their cells between rounding. We're not there 24/7. So again, it's a moment in time, and we have a lower threshold just to make sure that we're following up and doing what we can for patients. So the therapeutic housing area model, we think, is extremely useful to our patients. I highlighted a couple of benefits on PACE. This is a graph, it's a little busy, but this is a graph looking at our average daily census of therapeutic housing units over the last several years. We've had a real rapid and significant expansion of THUs, thanks a lot to the work we've done with the department. So you'll see on the top line, this is looking at the total census across basically MO and PACE units. We went from about 540 to about 920 beds across several years. And within that, most of that is driven by mental observation units, but there's also an increase about 80 to 90 PACE beds in there too. So that's pretty significant, and I think a reflection of a lot of the hard work done both within CHS and with the department. Next slide. And then this is a graph looking at self-injury, and it's related to the previous one. This is self-injury rates during that same time that I showed for mental health therapeutic housing unit census. And what we've seen is an association that over time, as we've increased the number of therapeutic housing units, the rate of self-injury in the jail has also continued to decrease. I think there's a lot of reasons that could be decreasing. It's not just in the THUs, but I do think there's some value and association here. And I'm happy to say that, despite seeing an increase during COVID, we're now back around pre-COVID levels in terms of self-injury. And as many board members know, there was a significant increase during and late into the pandemic. So that's it.
Dr. Cohen, please.
Thank you very much. I have a few questions.
Sure.
The department is now posting when they are locking someone down. So you have the capacity at this point to know for every person in the jails whether they are locking in themselves or whether the department has locked them in for some reason. And I hope that you take advantage of it, and I think you have an obligation to take advantage of it because that's a very important area. You also said that, you could ask someone if they're voluntarily locked in or not.
We do.
Well, you said you can't tell, and you didn't.
Well,
in your green,
yeah, I think we can always know for certain. We do ask patients and then work with them to have them, be able to be let out of their cell, but, it may not always be accurate. So the point is that we don't have 24-hour insight and we're not there all the time.
I understand that. You also state that medications may not be given, the medication rates you saw, which are pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
But we have recorded that the medication rates medication may not be given for any reason: patient choice, non-production, non-availability, etc. CHS is not able to extract the requested information from individual medical record notations. That seems like a serious problem to me. I hope it's not true. I mean, wrote it down, but I hope it's not true. You have to know for patients why they're not taking their medicine. If they're not taking it because they're not there, then you give it to them again. If they're refusing, you figure out some way of
Sure.
doing it. And if they're, but it's not that you said that you don't know non-production, not availability. If you're not producing it, you should know that. I don't understand why you said all
Yes,
those things.
so let me clarify that. I think, we do know on the individual level why someone may not be taking their medication. I think what we mean is an aggregate for reporting purposes. It's hard to pull that from the chart and report that out accurately.
Well, I would imagine they have other ways of pulling it. It's a critical element of your pharmacy program to know how many people are refusing medications, where that's happening, how many times you're not delivering medication. So I would.
Yeah, we do have that information, to
Yes,
be clear.
no, I
so-
assume you do, but you said that you sort of
That-
don't. And
but-
then,
yeah.
I was just very glad to see the increase in number of THU beds, but I'm disappointed to see that they're all MO beds. The increase, you said the majority.
They
of the
were,
increase-
no, just to be clear, so we went from about 200 PACE beds to about 288 or 290 PACE beds. So relatively speaking, it was a significant increase in PACE beds, but the majority of the volume is from MO beds just because we have so many more MO beds.
Right, no, I know you have so many more MO beds, but I'm looking forward to the day when you have much fewer MO beds, because the services that these people need and you wanted to give them is very difficult to do in those settings. So
I
that's why-
understand, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cohen. Any other questions? There being none, we'll go on to the policies, procedures regarding cell-side medication distribution during involuntary lock-ins.
Oh, sorry, I covered that in my presentation, but I can reinforce that.
If you can just make a.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
Recap.
So as I mentioned in the slides earlier on the PACE units, we have dedicated areas where individuals receive their medication. For any reason someone doesn't come for medication, then we can hold that medication and then work the patient to deliver that to them, which can include, when the circumstances are appropriate, cell-side medication.
Okay, again, I'll ask any questions regarding distribution of involuntary lock-ins medication. Okay, there being none, thank you very much,
Thank you.
CHS. Dr. Pat?
Sorry.
Patsy Yang, again, Senior Vice President, Health and Hospitals. I just wanted to recognize Dr. Subedi. He has been with CHS since 2017. So that's 7 years, 2 of which, the last 2 has been as a Chief Medical Officer. He has been offered an extraordinary opportunity and is, to our chagrin, sadness, accepted it. He's going to be Chief of Psychiatry at Bellevue, which will be great. So it's extraordinary, and he's made an incredible impression, a lasting one, on the service and our patients and his colleagues and me. And we're looking forward very much to working with him at Bellevue. We know the coordination is going to be infinitely improved, and I have no question whatsoever the strong leadership of CHS continues, only some of whom are sitting here in this room. So just wanted to call out Dr. Subedi.
Congratulations. Yes, Board Member Felipe?
Congratulations. I mean, we you have been parent and working like. So I'm looking forward to hearing about the value and
My pleasure, yeah, I'll do what I can.
Well, thank you and congratulations once again.
Thank you.
I know it's 4 o'clock. Any board members need a break, or shall we continue? I must ask. Okay, so we'll continue on. We're going to COBA updates.
Good afternoon, Board. My name is Antoinette Anderson. I am the 3rd Vice President of the Corrections Officers Benevolent Association. I have a few things to touch on. One is Rosem Singer is a unique facility where we house all of our female PICs in our rush area. In the areas where there is an excess of beds, it's a dorm area. We cannot house additional male PICs in that area. I have some stats for OBCC. As of, for the stats of October, we have 44 assaults on staff, 16 stabbings, 43 PIC on PIC incidents, well, assaults, and 16 slashings. For the month of November, we've had 9 assault on staff so far, 9 stabbings so far, 34 incidents, PIC on PIC, fights, 22 slashings. So I'm a little confused as to how we're making more room in the dorm areas of OBCC. Right now, we have 50 PICs to 1 officer, maybe 2 sometimes, if we have the staff to deal with those areas. If we're not going to have more staff on the floor, how can we make it safe for the PICs or the staff members? If there's 1 officer on the floor because we're having staff issues, how is it possible for 1 person to oversee 60 PICs if that's what the housing area is going to be afforded when there are more beds added to those areas in a dorm area? We are already having staff issues, and we will continue to have a rise in assaults on staff as well as a rise on assaults on PICs with more individuals in the housing areas. When it comes to the PACE units and the CAP units, we touched on this issue last month. And my stance does not change on the fact that those are specialized areas where you need specialized staff. Once again, the medical staff that's in that area is not allowed to administer certain medication, as if the PIC was in Bellevue, which are the orderlies. They're not allowed to do certain things. Not all medication works for certain PICs, depending on what their diagnosis is. At the end of the day, when it comes to correctional officers, our job is to make sure that everyone is safe. It's hard to do that if some PICs are not getting the right medication. We are not, and my stance will not change, are not equipped to handle those certain individuals. Some comments were made about the population. We can't control the population. Our jobs as correction officers is to assist as much as we can in doing our job in the housing areas and the service areas. So the only thing that I'm asking for, we're going to put more PICs in these dorm areas, give us more staff. And it's hard to staff Rikers Island because a lot of my coworkers can retire. So how are we going to replace them? Yes, DOC is holding job fairs. Yes, they're making it a little easier to pass the exam, but it's hard. It's very hard. When you go in these facilities and you see certain things, it's easy to point out the deficiencies, right? But it's hard to fix them. It's hard. It takes everybody. I'm not up here every month to say this is what the issue is and we can't fix it. No, we have to work collectively to fix it. One thing we can't fix is our population and them being mostly having mental illnesses issues. We can't fix that because the places where they should be going are no longer there. So can we come up with a plan on how we can help them and help all the staff? Because it's not just us being assaulted, it's everybody, as we can see, even the visitors that come in the facilities, they're being assaulted as well. Help us help you. Help us help the PICs. Not everything has to do with the training that we receive, because some of those things that, and when it comes to training, some of the things that the public feels that we should be doing is really not our job. Our job is care, custody, and control. We're there for security reasons. We're there to perform certain aspects of our job. But we're not there to get beat up and have broken eye sockets and have pins in our arms from broken limbs. Help us so we could better do our job. We need staff. Can you help us get staff? Because it's easy. It's very easy to make comments, but it's very hard for us men and women that perform these duties every single day and not getting the recognition that we deserve. Does anybody have any questions?
Well, not a question, but just the ability to protect you is the department's responsibility. I totally agree with you that adding 10 beds to these dormitories is not a good idea without adding staff. It's not a board issue. I mean, the board did for reasons that I don't understand. The board approved that resolution saying that it's okay for the department to increase the staffing. But I agree with you strongly that it's not safe for everybody involved to increase the population without increasing staff. And I think that the only solution the department has, since it does not appear, as you pointed out, that the department does not have the ability to hire significant numbers of staff.
But I have a question for you, Dr. Cohen.
Yes.
You made statements as to the commissioner letting them go.
Yeah.
Okay. So I just want to make a comment on that. You have to understand that DOC, we house them. The problem is the courts. The problem is not us. All that correction officers do is we watch them. We're not the reason why they're there. So be very mindful of the things that you say, because this is watched for many different reasons, right? So I'm gonna say this.
Well, can I respond?
Oh, wait. If the mental illness facilities, these hospitals are closed, what can be done to help us? Because what's happening is they were released in the street, and now, unfortunately, Rikers Island is now their home.
Just want to respond. The commissioner agreed with me, actually. She has the power to release people who are sentenced, and she said that she has released people who are sentenced. And I asked her how many people were in that situation, and she said hundreds. I understand.
Okay,
that
we have thousands.
well, in the sentenced group.
What I'm saying to you, my point to you is, sir, we have thousands of people that are housed on Rikers Island that are waiting for their cases to be heard. And unfortunately, they get involved in situations on Rikers Island that is adding on to their sentences. Once again, we have to deal with that aspect, right? So even for the sentenced individuals, it's hard for us to get them off the island, right? Because if the state facilities are closing, where are we sending them?
No, I was only talking about the sentenced people that the department
we-
has the ability
We're gonna
to
move,
release.
we're gonna move on. Any other questions? Board
Thank
member?
you, Ms. Anderson. I have a question. What, in your expertise, would be one of the ways to improve staffing? Because staffing has been an issue for years now, and I think that's a critical component in terms of how we provide safety.
Realistically, we have about 2,000 officers that can leave in the next 2 years. We need about 4,000 officers. We need staff. And unfortunately, we had 3 years where no one was hired in the rank of correctional officer. So if you could find us 4,000 people, we could solve this problem. No. I can hear you. Mhm.
No, you do.
Side because that publicity that difficult for improvement situation.
1 second, you have to turn the mic on, Just speak. That's,
Yes.
just speak naturally, sir.
We hear you.
Mhm.
But anyway, and I mentioned the fact that because of the publicity that we got, talk about it, made it difficult for the department to recruit. We can, you can explain to us about needing staff. We don't do the recruiting. It's the department that does the recruiting, and they're doing it. They're trying,
Mhm.
but, if publicity continues, less and less people want to come back and use time in the installment plan as well.
Understood.
To be, we have to collaborate together. Try to push this department so that they're interested at what we use to entice people to the department. No benefits is good, salary is good, scholarships is good. You have the Explorer program going in. So you have different kinds of, put that out more there and start working a lot more closely together. Board would not be able to get you the steps that we're looking. Also a labor relations.
It is, but he asked me what would we need, and I answered his question.
So I think that we have to go back. Do recruitment.
Well, the recruitment is being done, right? But like you pointed out, if it's always negativity being put out about correctional officers, that is a problem, because every time we in the paper, it's always something negative. We have a lot of officers that have a lot of education behind them, that have businesses, that do a lot of community service, but that's not what the public works on. What the public works on is always the negativity. I'm not saying that this is a bad job. No, we have situations like every other job in this city, but we need everybody's help. Agreed.
Thing is that, I know you have a city council as well.
Mm.
And also so that they don't make decisions for you. Not knowing what really goes on. So that's on that.
Thank you. We're involved with the city council as well.
You need to. Also demand a lot of expertise in mental.
That's our population. DOC does provide training, right? But when we do our jobs, because at the end of the day, we're human. When we react a certain way, that's the way that we react as a human and also as a professional, we're penalized. No one can walk in a housing area. Let's take example of the situation that just happened with a politician that went on Rikers Island. How can you react to that? Let's be realistic. We have to understand that, yes, we are correctional officers and we are professional, but we're human deep down inside. And yes, we get penalized for certain things, but the same way that we would react if the situation happened on the street is the same way that some people act when they're at work. We can't get penalized for reacting to certain things, certain ways. I'm not saying that somebody needs to be punished to the point where it's affecting them severely. But if I'm at work and I'm performing my job and I'm punched in my face, and now I can't see because my eye socket is now broken, y'all gotta make it make sense. Because we have these same incidents happen to the PRCs and we react to it. We have to go in and save them. But when it's happening to us, I'm not gonna say in some situations we do have PRCs that help us. But we also have to understand that everybody that's in that situation, that's in that environment, is human. We all have rights and we all need to be treated the same way. Everything can't be that we're abusive when we're getting pounded on.
Well,
That's all I'm saying.
and it's always been my position, from the board perspective, that we have to create policies and standards and reviews for anyone in the jails. That's staff, that's PICs across the board. Understanding that there are collective bargaining agreements, but that should not prohibit us from areas in searching for ways to provide support to staff. And we will continue to look, in those directions so that we can make it safer so that you can go home with, without injury, or alive. So that is my commitment, to, and it has been from day one. For
Thank
the
you.
officers.
Thank you.
If there's no other questions, for Koba and Antoinette, we'll move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We will now hear the public comments from the audience. Jasmine will call the names of those who signed up to speak.
Our first speaker, I believe it says Kenneth Harrison. I apologize if I read that wrong. Thank you. Mr. Harrison is no longer here, so the next speaker is Chaplain Dr. Victoria A. Phillips. Dr. V.
I'd like to say I'll go pretty quick. I'm Dr. Victoria Phillips, Dr. V, speaking solely in my name today. I'll say it again, the tablets aren't the saving grace. Who has access to the searches on the tablets? Attorneys should immediately press this board for clarity. This board needs to speed up the process in which an attorney has access to actually meet with their client instead of spending hours waiting for one. I just returned from Somos last night, but last I checked, August 2027 is what the current law states that Rikers will close, and yet all of the legal expertise that now seems to be leading this meeting, pushing a variance through Thanksgiving 2027 is asinine. Charisma Jones was a heartbeat that could have been released. In fact, she died a torturous death July 14, 2024, and would have been released September 9, 2024. A former DOC employee and current board member who I personally spoke to in 2023 regarding my concerns of them appearing to ignore or disrespect women who were not officers actually asked me why don't I let it go after I testified on the record about the threats from an officer who then held a union leadership post. Chair, you know the one I'm talking about, the one you said you witnessed, and I quote, "I saw what she did to you. Benny gonna have to handle that in this room after the January 2024 meeting." Not one BOC member reached out to me, even after the next one where I reported a BOC staff member reached out due to their own abuse and had a police report. Through it all, I have still showed up fighting for people's rights that are often unheard and look just like us. So how's your follow-up for civilians and detainees if this is your response to us in the community? Why are you all allowing this chair, as he disrespects and minimizes Dr. Cohen, legit questions and concerns? It's not a reflection of his kind held in DOC, but ours, black and brown. What part of his amendments today did the community members detained on Rikers not need? Many of you often vote against him because of his board, because of this board clearly moves off of a lack of emotional intelligence and clicks rather than a moral compass in the law. How many times since last year have I asked you, Chair, where's the PREA report? At the city council hearing on sexual assault, the commissioner stated she needed 14 more investigators. Yeah, I failed to see a testimony from you. Previous board members have advocated for BOC and DOC needs. This June, an officer sexually assaulted by another officer wasn't outreached by DOI for over 20 days. They contacted her after I mentioned to DOC leadership her case. So where's the accountability? DOC mentioned they cannot control the population. So I asked, can they control themselves? Why not? Lastly, I'll end here. Stop bullying. All of you should know better than to disrespect the Black woman, the very nurturers of this ungrateful nation. Chair, you should follow your own advice that you gave the commissioner when you said hearing the expertise of those who came before you. You don't often listen to Dr. Cohen. About 2 meetings ago, I actually suggested that you rewatch the meetings and observe your lack of respect for all board members. You stated you didn't need to. Your lack of respect for all BOC members is never hitting, and it's disturbing. You don't need a BOC personnel committee. You have an enormous job already. It's very clear that you need to pay attention. Okay, I'll finish with this. Today, there are still unmanned posts. Triple shifts while on hospital posts are all posing public safety. So this board who wants to meddle in personnel needs to actually focus on what's going on in the island, because officers are still working over 180 hours. How are they supposed to maintain their health, mental health, and families? Violating this violating this as 180 hours violates the Board of Corrections minimum standards by 10 hours. Do your job. Peace and blessings.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Michael Klinger.
Good afternoon. Yeah. My name is Michael Klinger. I'm a jail services attorney with Brooklyn Defender Services. We appreciate the opportunity to share with you today experiences of people whom we represent regarding both the practice of deadlocking in cells for extended periods of time, and also regarding the department's failure to adhere to its directive on reasonable accommodation for at least some people with severe hearing disabilities. First, BDS has confirmed several instances in which people we represent who are held in MO, PACE, or other specialized housing have been locked in for extended periods of time. In one case, more than a week locked in a cell while the water was turned off so that the toilet would not flush. The unsanitary condition in the cell was compounded by flies and an intense odor, and the person was only eventually released after they decompensated to the point where they harmed themselves. And that act came to the attention of a captain who claimed that they'd been deadlocked by a few COs who had apparently gone rogue. But that does not explain how it could have lasted for more than a week, undetected by other COs, by captains, deputy wardens, all of whom make rounds. Another person reported they and their entire housing unit were subjected to lock-ins lasting 23 hours a day for a period of months, during which time it was often necessary to request medical attention by yelling out windows to neighboring housing units to ask people there to alert CHS because the officers on the unit itself refused to assist, saying that the people seeking assistance didn't really need it. Second, with respect to reasonable accommodations for people with hearing impairments, we want to share the recent experience of one of the people we represent. They are severely hearing impaired and rely, when in the community, on video conference technology because their primary language is American Sign Language. That means their primary language is not English, and that means lip reading is not a useful means for them to receive information. Upon their arrival at Rikers, they attempted to convey the fact of their hearing impairment, but no staff followed up. They were never contacted by a disability rights coordinator or anyone else to determine the appropriate accommodation. Instead, some department staff insisted that the person could read lips and mocked them when they struggled. They were not given access to video conferencing, so they could not speak with loved ones. They struggled to make themselves understood in basic ways, making every act of communication an ordeal. Seeking to assist, we attempted to identify and contact the disability rights coordinator and other potentially relevant staff by phone and by email. Nobody got back to us, and nobody got back to our client. It can be difficult to know where to begin in addressing such egregious failures. We urge the board to protect the people in the department's custody through constant inspections, alerting the department to failures, but also raising the alarm more broadly when necessary. The rules are in place, but consequences for failing to follow them are non-existent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Will you provide the staff with the name of that person? I mean, you can't, your choice. I mean, the answer seems to be that you would do ESL as a.
Let them respond, please.
I think we're constrained here a little bit by fears of retaliation and
Okay.
almost any additional detail, including obviously names, would be identifying. But I'll have to check with my colleagues and then get back to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kenneth Harrison.
Excuse me. Hi, my name is Officer Kenneth Harrison. What you just witnessed is what we go through in the housing areas. You, sir, you may have been an unaffected victim of another inmate on an insult or an assault. We are officers who come to do our jobs. That's all I wanted, for y'all to get that understanding. We don't have no one to say, hey, stop. And next thing you know, we get assaulted. We did nothing. You did nothing. And it just happens just that fast. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dorothy Weldon.
Good afternoon. My name is Dorothy Weldon. I am the Special Litigation Attorney at New York County Defender Services. Since the whistleblower account came to light last month, our entire office has rushed to identify our incarcerated clients in MO, PACE, and CAPS units, which is actually not an easy task, and to urgently check in on their health and safety. We can now update the board that almost every single one of our clients housed in GRVC's PACE and MO units report the widespread use of deadlocking. We can also report that deadlocking is not limited to that one facility or these particular units, or even exclusively to units dedicated to serving those with mental health issues. And I'll just answer a question that was posed to the commissioner. This is an ongoing issue. It's still happening. It's extremely widespread. We have clients who have been subjected to similar procedures in OBCC, RNDC, Rosie's, and so on. Every day, we are learning something new and horrifying about this practice. So it's one thing to talk about it here. It's one thing to acknowledge in the abstract that this is happening. It's a completely different thing to hear person after person describe the physical and psychological toll of deadlocking. We have one client with an extensive history of suicide attempts who shared with us that to him, deadlocking is, and I quote, being trapped. There's no TV, no tablet, no calls, no meds. You have strong suicidal thoughts. I've had multiple suicide attempts and they started from being deadlocked. Before that, my thoughts were not as potent. Another client shared with us, I've been deadlocked many times. I've been in my cell for no reason, just because of my disorder. At the end of the day, they don't listen to me. They don't help me. All of my rights are violated. We had a client in Rosie's describe that her entire unit was locked down for multiple days, 24/7. And as she described it, she was put in a, quote, condemned cell for days. No working sink, no working toilet, black mold everywhere. She got a fever just from being there. These are not isolated incidents. They are not mistakes. This is a pattern and practice. We appreciate the board's condemnation today of these practices, but we implore the board to take more action when it comes to investigation, to broaden it as much as possible. And I would just note that as of today, we've been informed Ms. Wisniewski, who testified extensively about this the last time we were here, has not been contacted by any board members or anyone. She's ready, willing, and able to give you all more information to help you with this investigation. And she's waiting by the phone and hasn't heard from anyone. The Department of Correction cannot and will not change its culture of human rights abuses and the degradation of our clients. DOC has failed at every level, and we've said this before, we will say it again. We need an overhaul now that can only come through federal receivership. Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to state that, Ms. Weldon, two things. That I think I said earlier, I believe in full accountability from this board, department, individuals, and defenders. Do you have internal controls or practices? And why would it take a report of a news article for you to hear from your clients that there's been such activities going on? I mean, what are your internal controls?
I would just note, I believe that issues very similar to this have been brought before this board. Notably, my colleague Natalie Fiorenzo is frequently in here telling you all about lockdowns of our clients. I don't know that we realize how widespread this practice was. I think it did take somebody like Ms. Wisniewski coming forward for us to do our own additional investigation. But deadlocking is the worst kept secret on Rikers Island. I encourage the board to talk to people about it. And I'm flabbergasted by the suggestion that the commissioner could not be aware of these things going on. It's extremely widespread. And like I said, the worst kept secret.
Okay, but I believe there's enough accountability to go around. What are your internal controls, and why did you and your peers did not address this issue?
Sorry, why did defenders not address our clients being involuntarily locked down?
No,
Do you?
no.
Yeah.
I'm saying is that, what are you interview your clients.
Yes.
You understand what's going on. Why did it have to take an article or a testimony for you to be back here to testify in this matter when you should have been testifying that it's widespread before?
We have testified about this before.
I'm sorry.
And if you're asking why
you're out
we've
of order.
advocated for our clients to get released from these horrific conditions, we've been doing that every single day, but we are constrained. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, please. I'm sorry.
Do you have an additional question?
I don't have any other questions from the board. We'll move forward.
I just want to say that your colleagues have made this point over and over again, and it's the department's responsibility.
Yes, to be clear, it hasn't always been me standing here. I'm actually new to this role, but our correction specialists have testified so many times. And I think if you look to our written submitted testimony, I believe from this meeting and also from the previous one, I'm happy to send the board citations to where we've brought this issue up before. But I think accountability is not really meant to be on the defender's plate right now. That doesn't make sense.
Well, that's what I will ask for, accountability across the board. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Our next speaker is remote. Danielle Gerard.
Can you all hear me? Can you all hear me? Thank you. I had to wait a while to be unmuted. Thank you, Chair, ED, and board members. My name's Danielle Gerard. I'm a senior staff attorney at Children's Rights. Before testifying, I would like to formally request that you return to posting all documents relevant to BOC meetings in advance of each meeting as specified on your website. It is not possible for the public to testify relevantly and adequately about variances and resolutions without reading them first. It is beyond appalling that the public had to wait for a whistleblower to learn that incarcerated persons with mental health issues are frequently locked inside cells for weeks or months at a time without access to medication. They are left to deteriorate with no one to advocate on their behalf. By all reports, this horrific treatment has lasted well over a year. Where were members of the board? Don't you visit the island regularly? Where was Correctional Health Services? How is it possible that this is going on and only one former staffer notices and goes to the press? Why is the chair blaming the victims and their counsel? Half the population on Rikers has mental health conditions, and over 1,000 detainees have serious mental illness. Research has shown that the presence of mental illness, as opposed to incarcerated persons' misconduct records, increases the likelihood of their being disciplined using punitive segregation. This continues to occur despite widespread acknowledgement that isolation worsens mental health conditions and causes long-term harm. Children's Rights could certainly reiterate what we have been saying for years. The criminalization of mental health is a direct result of the lack of investment in community-based mental health services and supportive housing. The mayor's suspension of Local Law 42, which bans solitary confinement in the city's jails, certainly contributes to the deplorable conditions that Justina Rozovinsky has brought to the public's and your attention. The delay in decarceration that would help enable Rikers to close on time is surely another factor in the torture being visited daily on detained mentally ill New Yorkers. How much more do we need to know before closing Rikers gets treated with the urgency it deserves? Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Liana Desaur. The next speaker is Lauren Stevens Davidowitz.
Hi. Hello, am I the next speaker? Oh, am I the next speaker? I don't think you said my name.
Hi.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Okay, sorry. Hi, everybody. I'm Lauren Stevens Davidowitz, a staff attorney at Legal Aid's Prisoners' Rights Project. I want to thank the board for making deadlocking and all extended lockdowns a central focus of today's meeting, and especially for unanimously passing the resolution condemning the practice and urging reporting on the practice. DOC's continued use of this practice is abhorrent, and we are disturbed at DOC's seeming refusal to stop it entirely. Based on recent reports from people in custody, we know that the practice is widespread, as Ms. Weldon said. Extended lock-ins are constant in certain housing units like West Facility, but they occur in any facility where DOC staff wishes to control an individual. Last week, for example, an attorney said her client had been deadlocked for long periods in general population in RNDC. We've spoken to a man who was deadlocked in GRVC, but he wasn't in a PACE unit. He reported regularly not receiving his medication and not having showered for 6 weeks. And of course, Charisma Jones was deadlocked before her death. We have also learned that not only does DOC deny people who are deadlocked medical care, but it cites medical need as a reason to lock in for 23 hours a day certain people who are not in infirmary units. And I just want to be clear that numerous times a week, my office sends emails to the BOC regarding violations of the minimum standards, including the use of deadlocking. As time passes, we ask the board not to lose focus on deadlocking, because we all know from years of experience that if not watched vigilantly, And frankly, even when watched vigilantly, DOC violates the rules. We also commend Board Member Cohen for highlighting the mayor's years-long use of emergency executive orders to suspend many of the board's minimum standards. This blatant assault on our city's charter and has got to stop. If the DOC truly remains in crisis and has not been able to stabilize for 3 years, why are we deferring to this agency? Why are we trusting its word? Why are we permitting DOC to overcrowd their housing units? Alternatively, if there's not an emergency, why are we allowing the mayor to suspend the board's authority? On August 23rd, 2003, Commissioner Molina declared that the department, quote, doesn't have a staffing crisis anymore. In October of 2023, the Nunez Monitor described the department's staffing as one of the richest ratios among any jail system that the Monitor had ever encountered. Yet today, a DOC representative cited a staffing crisis to ask to overcrowd OBCC. And the mayor and the DOC commissioner cites that crisis to justify severely limiting this board's powers. If the staffing crisis has returned, not give DOC carte blanche to violate the minimum standards. So just to sum up, we wholeheartedly support Board Member Cohen's suggestion that the board require the commissioner to submit a plan in order to solve this so-called emergency. And we hope that the board passes that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone who attended and participated in today's meeting. I'd just like to state that during this week, up until November 21st, I will be communicating with the executive director and staff regarding committee assignments and board members regarding committee assignments. So this board meeting is scheduled, the next board meeting is scheduled to take place on Tuesday, January 14th, 2025 at 1 p.m. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor? This meeting is adjourned.
May I ask you something?
Yeah.